51st annual commemorative service honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We are once again this year joining you live from Horizon Sanctuary of the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church. And we are proud, as Fox 5 does so much for the community, 365 days a year, to be bringing this program, this service to you live again this year. Today's program will be filled with music, including a performance from gospel and R&B singer B.B. Winans. There'll be readings from Scripture and a keynote address from Bryan Stevenson, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. We'll also hear from Dr. Bernice King, and presiding today are Reverend Natasha Reed Rice from Ebenezer Baptist Church, along with Minister Sam Collier. We invite you to stay and celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. King with us over the next few hours as our program gets underway.
Good morning. Welcome to the 51st annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. commemorative service on what would be the celebration of his 90th birthday. This is also, yes, the 34th federal observance of the King holiday, and the 47th year that is being broadcast by WAGA Fox 5. Aren't you glad to be in the house today? For we are here to celebrate not only a son of this sanctuary, but a son of a mighty God who gave us the blessing of his presence, of his prophecy, of his ministry, and of his witness. For in his own words, he said that he tried to give his life serving others. If we are to remember and to acknowledge him, remember him as one who tried to love somebody, who tried to clothe the naked and to feed the hungry. If we were to call him a drum major, he said that we should call him a drum major for justice. For his witness, his words, and his action provided light in dark places. He stood courageously and bravely when others would not even speak, and lived a life that teaches us all to choose love over hate. So today we come to celebrate this great man who pressed America to be beautiful, and who insisted on justice in the face of injustice so that we all could lift our voices and sing. We will now move forward with the presentation of flags of the nations by the Berean Crusaders Pathfinders Club. And following that, we will have a musical selection, America the Beautiful by Miss Mackenzie Grace Walker, and the Negro National Anthem played by Minister Angela Christie. Let's all stand.
While you are on your feet, I think we all know that you can't say the name Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. without lifting up the name of Jesus. So I know we have a program, but before we jump into the program, can we just take a moment and give God some praise in this place? Come on, would you lift up his name in this building? All at your home, come on, give him some praise. Tell him you love him. Thank him for the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and for the freedom that we live in today. Come on, give him some praise. You're not praising me, you're praising the God who created us. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Would you be seated? I am reminded of why we do this every year by a young couple that traveled down from South Carolina, age 21, a mixed race couple who fell in love and recently told the white girl's mom and dad, we've fallen in love. And he said, you had one rule in this house growing up: never bring a black man home. If you bring a black man home, you'll be disowned. And she said, well, I guess I'll be disowned then. She lost family. She lost friends standing up for what was right. And that is why we do this every year, to remember that we have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. The next voice that you'll hear is the great prophet, Apostle Darrell Winston, as he gives our invocation. Then we'll have a scripture reading, the Old Testament by Cantor Lauren Asnick, a scripture reading, the New Testament by Minister Cameron Friend, and a Quran reading by Professor Amin Toomey. Now, there was an old show called The Apollo, and on The Apollo they had a little man, and he was called the Sandman. And the goal of the Sandman was to take I don't know if it was a broom or a contraption, and if you went too long, or if you were horrible, he would yank you off stage. Now, we don't have the Sandman here, but we will yank you off stage if you go too long. In the name of Jesus, let us continue.
There is such a synthesis of the Spirit in this place. Spirit of oneness and unity is in this house. Will you grab the hand of the person next to you as we pray? Oh, great God of mercy, great God of grace, we come today. A few of your believing children come in this hallowed place to give thanks to you, oh God. We give thanks because we ought to give you thanks. We give you thanks because you've been better to us than we've been to ourselves. From the earliest of our existence down to this present time, you've been good to us. Your mercy, your grace, your loving kindness is better than life. We come to give thanks for your servant, the prophet Martin Luther King Jr. We thank you for his life and his legacy. We thank you for the mantle that rests upon him, and even now, with our hearts heavy as we deal with over againstness. Our hearts are heavy because while we are here this morning, hundreds of thousands have been furloughed, and while we are here, wickedness is in high places, and while we're here, evil is strutting, and while we're here, children are in cages, and while we are here, the weak is crying out. Lord, hear the cry of your people. Show yourself mighty, show yourself strong. Hear the cries of your children as they fight, as they contend, as they war. But we know that you're still on the throne, and we know that you never left us without chance, without hope. And so we say today, have mercy upon us, great God. Show yourself mighty, show yourself strong. Let there be transformation in the land. Release your power and let your presence fall. Release your power when your name is called. And we say in the voice of the ancestors, ride on, King Jesus. Ride on, King Jesus. No man can stop you. Every diabolical plan of the enemy come to naught. Ride on, King Jesus. And we thank you and we praise you because we know that you shall and you will. And we thank you and we praise you because we know all is well. And it is so, and it shall be. Amen, amen, amen.
The moment the Israelites escape from slavery through the waters of the Red Sea to freedom, they sing out to God with joy. In Judaism, we call this song Shirat Hayam, the song of the sea. Az yashir Moshe ובני ישראל את השירה הזאת לאדוני ויאמרו לאמור השיר לאדוני כי גאה גאה סוס ורוכבו רמה וים. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. God is my strength and song. He has become my salvation. Pharaoh's chariots and his host he has cast into the sea. In the greatness of your excellency, you overthrow those who rise up against you. You send forth your wrath. It consumes them as stubble. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות וספלה. Who is like you, O Lord, among the powers? Who is like you, glorious in holiness? You stretched out your right hand. The earth swallowed the oppressors. In your loving kindness, you have led the people you have redeemed. You have guided them in your strength to your holy habitation. You shall bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place, O Lord, which you have made for yourself to dwell in, the sanctuary, O Lord, with your hands have established. Adonai Imloch le'olam va'ed. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. Thank you.
Good morning. As I was reflecting on which New Testament text to read, to remember the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I was led to Philippians 2. Therefore, if there is any encouragement in Christ, if there is any consolation of love, if there is any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and compassion, make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. Do nothing from selfish or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not consider equality with God as a thing to be grasped, but rather he emptied himself by taking on the form of a bondservant and being made in human likeness of men. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. For this reason also God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, so that the name of Jesus every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth. And every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God our Father. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Greetings of peace to all of you. I will start with a verse from the Quran. In the name of God, the most merciful, most compassionate. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله خبير عليم إن الله عليم خبير. O mankind, truly we have created you from a male and a female, and we made you peoples and tribes that you may come to know one another. Surely the most noble amongst you before God are the most reverent. Truly God is knowing, God is aware. So rather than using these differences of tribe, race, ethnicity, language, religion to separate us, they ought to be the impetus for knowing and learning more about one another. For indeed, as was also revealed in the Quran, if God had so willed, he would have made all of us one nation. He didn't. Rather, he left it up to us to be that one nation by choice, not by birth. It is related that the Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, was a nation unto himself with all the qualities that he embodied. He responded after being asked by God to proclaim the pilgrimage, "How can I call all of humanity when my voice cannot carry that far?" God said, "Issue the call, and we will make your voice reach them." Abraham stood and proclaimed the pilgrimage to the sacred house in Mecca, and God caused the mountains to bow in humility so that Abraham's voice would travel to the far corners of the earth. Dr. King also had a call, a dream that he was inspired to proclaim from the mountaintop. We pray that Dr. King's call, that we are all one despite of our differences, continue to reverberate, inspiring all of us to come together as one. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "God does not look at your bodies. He does not look at your forms. He looks at your hearts." Let us resolve to be united in our hearts, that we may come to know one another better, and to collaborate with one another stronger, and to look out for each other, for we are indeed out of many one. God commands justice, the doing of good, the liberality to kith and to kin, and he forbids all shameful deeds, injustices and transgressions. He instructs you that you may receive admonition. May God peace and blessings be upon all of you.
Lest we think Dr. King was just a Southern black preacher fighting racism in the South or just in America, his words of urgency speak otherwise. For they stretched over the borders into places like South Africa and small villages in Italy, in Berlin as the wall came tumbling down. His words insisting that freedom should ring from every tenement and every hamlet, from every state and every city, that we would be able to speed up the day when all of God's children, black men and white men, black women and white women, would be able to speed up that day, so that we would see among Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, Muslims and all faiths, could join together and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty. We are all free at last. So with that, as you see assembled before me, this beautiful choir shall sing of the freedom songs that Dr. King preached on all the way from South Korea. Following the Far East Broadcasting Children's Choir from South Korea, we will hear a word proclaimed by Reverend Dr. Bernice A. King, the one who continues to carry the mantle and the message of her father. Following Dr. King, we will hear from Miss Samia Nkrumah, another daughter of a great man, Kwame Nkrumah, the one who led Ghana into its freedom and existence apart from Britain. She will come to bring us words from the country of Ghana. And following her, we will hear greetings, brief greetings, from the Honorable Senator David Perdue, the Honorable Lucy McBath, the new Congresswoman from the 6th Congressional District of the state of Georgia, the Honorable Chris Carr, Attorney General for the state of Georgia, and our mayor named Keisha, the Honorable Keisha Lance Bottoms from the city of Atlanta. And following Mayor Bottoms, we will hear from the pastor of this great church, Ebenezer, the Reverend Dr. Raphael G. Warnock. And bringing up the rear of that train, we will be blessed by the powerful and anointed singing of Minister Latrice Pace. Now, the Far East Broadcasting Children's Choir.
For Well, this is indeed the day that the Lord has made. We ought to all rejoice and be glad in it. I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. Good morning to all, and on behalf of the King Center, we are honored and delighted that you are here with us to join in the celebration of what would have been my father's 90th birthday. Just briefly on today at about 2:30 to 4:30, I want to invite those of you in this audience and those that are hearing via the television and online, if you're in Atlanta and you have a moment, we are having a 2-hour sneak preview into our nonviolence education and training at the Martin Luther King Jr. Recreation and Aquatic Center right around the corner from the King Center, and one at Spelman College in the Cosby L3 building. And so if you'd like to come, it's free of charge from 2:30 to 4:30. And this evening at the King Center at 6 p.m., we will have our beloved community talks. If you need more information about who will be there, you can go online to thekingcenter.org. As we commemorate what would have been my father's 90th birthday, 51st annual commemorative service, and the 34th federal holiday observance, I believe and declare that we are in a state of emergency. We are in a state of emergency because of our humanitarian crises, and it's not at our southern borders. It is in our nation and many nations of the world. The concern and compassion for human welfare across the board is being threatened. In this nation and many nations across the world, we have witnessed the powerful resurgence of nationalistic and white supremacist ideologies that are perpetuating dangerous, damning, and destructive policies and practices against all of humanity. My brothers and sisters, our humanity is literally on the verge of digressing to two Americas and becoming the disunited States of America. This is a humanitarian crisis, and we are in a state of emergency. When people, including children, are seeking a better life, are tear-gassed and caged, this is a humanitarian crisis, and we are in a state of emergency. When chilling displays of hate, discrimination, racism, and indifference are lauded, and when black lives are endangered by calls to police for trivial, non-criminal matters, then this is a humanitarian crisis, and we are in a state of emergency. When prejudice and bigotry are emboldened by harmful rhetoric and policy spoken and supported by heads of nations, and xenophobia and Islamophobia rear their hateful heads, this is a humanitarian crisis, and we are in a state of emergency. When our schools continue to be unsafe spaces, Emma, for learning because of impotent gun control laws, this is a humanitarian crisis, and we are in a state of emergency. When there is an assault on voter integrity and voter access in some of our democratic elections, this is a humanitarian crisis, and we are in an emergency. When the right to protest, a fundamental right in a vibrant democracy, is challenged in America, as some elected officials and citizens question what my father called the right to protest for rights, when economic injustice persists, as many without receiving a livable wage and the gender pay gap is not eliminated, this is a humanitarian crisis, and we are in a state of emergency. When the criminal justice system continues to fail people of color and housing discrimination based on race and income source continue to be a barrier to affordable housing, when extreme natural disasters, the results according to reputable scientists of climate change and our inattention to it, culminated in death and destruction, this is a humanitarian crisis. And we are in a state of emergency. And when a government shutdown persists to the point that it affects the livelihood of individuals and those in dire need of critical social services, this is a humanitarian crisis, and we are all in a state of emergency. On this, the King holiday, I hear the authentic King raising the question, where do we go from here? We can either continue on this course of chaos, or we can travel on the pathway toward true community. In any emergency, there is always a set of protocols. And since we are in a humanitarian emergency, protocol dictates that we look to our survival manual, the Word of God, which conveys that from one blood, God has made all nations to dwell on the face of the earth. Or, as it states in the MLK version, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. What affects one directly affects all indirectly, and I cannot be all that I ought be until you are all that you ought be, and you cannot be all that you ought be until I am all that I ought be. The U.S. cannot be what it should be unless Mexico is what it ought be. We can try to build a wall to physically separate ourselves from others, but walls do not negate our interconnectedness. Brothers and sisters, what should people who are tied in a single garment of destiny do when they find themselves in an emergency? They stop operating on a me plane and start operating on a we plane, because they accept and recognize their interconnectedness and begin engaging each other in a manner that reflects shared power, resources, and dignity. When we realize we are tied together in a single garment of destiny, we stop embracing a cancel culture whereby we dismiss those who think differently from us or fall short of our justice standard. We must remember that nonviolence, as espoused by Dr. King, seeks to defeat injustice and not people. Now is the time to rise up above our individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of humanity. Let us lay aside our fears and our false assumptions and our implicit bias and our ignorances and our anger and our bitterness and our apathy and our indifference that prevents us from living together as brothers and sisters and working together in a diligent and determined manner to rid our world house of inhumane and unjust conditions. We all, each one of us, under the sound of my voice, have a role and a responsibility. This is not somebody else's problem or somebody else's issue. These are our issues and our problems. We can no longer wait on an elected official or a faith leader or a civic leader. The authentic king took ownership of the problems during his time and accepted responsibility for his role in bringing about social change. He left his teachings and examples that each one of us can embrace and apply to the pressing social and political issues of our time. The authentic king reminded us that human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires, yes, sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless and exertion and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. And so why wait on somebody else when we can take ownership of the problems we see and step up to make a difference? Why wait when we have the capacity to work hand in hand with others to bring about needed changes? When it looked as though this King Historical Park would not be open during the King holiday due to a government shutdown, Delta Airlines Foundation did not wait. They stepped up with a solution by giving $82,000 plus. When residents no longer wanted to live on Confederate Avenue, they did not wait on city officials right here in Atlanta. Instead, they organized and they collaborated to get the name changed to United Avenue. In rural Livingston, Alabama, parents in a segregated school system did not wait for a state mandate to desegregate the schools. They got together, black and white, and advocated for the first racially integrated school, University Charter School. As we commemorate the 90th birthday of my father, we can no longer wait. In my father's 1961 American Dream speech, he reminded us that the hour is late and the clock of destiny is ticking out. We must act now before it's too late. It is trite but urgently true that if America is to remain a first-class nation, she can no longer have second-class citizens. The hour is late, America. The hour is late, World House. The hour is late, my brothers and sisters. And if we're going to stabilize and strengthen our nation and world, then we can no longer wait on another Martin Luther King Jr. It's time for you to be a king. Look at your neighbor and tell them, be a king. We can no longer wait to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God while others are seeking to delay and deny justice because they are more devoted to order than justice. We can no longer wait to restore civility. Each of us can turn the tide by speaking with and to each other in ways that call each other up instead of calling each other out. We can no longer wait to rid our world of poverty and racism and militarism while others are perpetuating an unjust, immoral status quo. If we really want to make real the promises of democracy, now is the time on this King holiday to stop quoting King out of context and misquoting him to suit our own purposes. Brothers and sisters, it's time to stop merely praising King with platitudes and pleasantries. Now is the time to start embracing his vision of humanity tied in a single garment of destiny and to start living our best life by repping the authentic King. God bless you.
Due to a scheduling concern, we will now have the Honorable Mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms. Following her, we will have our international greetings from Ms. Samia Nkrumah.
Good afternoon. I was born 31 years and 3 days after the birth of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., nearly 15 years after the start of the Montgomery bus boycott, 7 years after the March on Washington, and nearly 5 years after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, and just 2 years after the assassination of Dr. King in Memphis, Tennessee. While history may say that I was born into Generation X, I believe I was born into Generation Could. We could because Dr. King and so many others did. Just over 1 year ago, when I was sworn in as mayor of this city, joining me on that day in prayer was the pastor of this great church. And in the legacy of Dr. King, Dr. Warnock prayed in King's Chapel on the campus of Morehouse College that day that Atlanta might show America how to be America again. So we received that prayer as a city, and we believe that we could be more as a city. So we showed America how to be America again when we ended cash bail bond in the city of Atlanta, and no longer do you stay in jail simply because you are poor. Because we are sons and daughters of Dr. King in this city, we showed America how to be America again when we set aside $100,000 for the first time in our city's budget for HIV and AIDS support. And we believed and we declared that we could raise $1 billion to combat affordable housing in our city. And I believe that Dr. Warnock's prayers were answered when Atlanta showed America how to be America again, when we closed our doors to ICE because we would not be complicit in a policy that separated families at its borders. So I stand here today grateful to have been born with etched into my DNA the mantra, she believed she could, and so she did. And as we stand here and we face challenges not ever seen in my lifetime, may we continue to believe, may we continue to live, and may we continue to work each day to show America how to be America again, because life's most persistent and urgent question remains, what are you doing for others? Thank you, and God bless you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And warm, very warm, in fact, greetings from Ghana and Africa, your home, the home of every single African. After all, Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah said that I am not an African because I was born in Africa. I'm an African because Africa was born in me. I thank the King Center my dear sister Bernice, and all of you for including me in this historic meeting and gathering. I'm here not in my personal capacity as such, but for what I represent. And that is a vision for the total freedom and unity of Africa and Africans everywhere. Indeed, many of us maybe were not born in 1957 when Ghana became independent, as we heard. But before the independence celebrations took place, the government of Ghana thought that no, we cannot celebrate without the presence of some prominent sons and daughters, Africans who are living abroad. Dr. King was one of those invited to witness that historic declaration of independence. Yes, our links go far and deep. He came to Ghana in 1957, and there he not only witnessed the historic celebrations and heard Kwame Nkrumah's declaration that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of Africa and Africans. And for us, Africa is not only the continent, it is Africans everywhere in the globe. North, South, East, West Africa, the Caribbean, North America, Brazil, Australia, everywhere where Africans live. Now, in Accra, Ghana in 1957, Dr. King met and interacted with the head of the official US delegation, Richard Nixon. These two men met in Accra in 1957, something that we would have thought it would have been very difficult for it to happen right here at the time. But that just shows us what a shared vision can do. It can do the impossible. The impossible becomes possible. And I hope this is what has brought me here to you, to be with you today. We have a mission to accomplish. A mission to accomplish, to realize the dreams of great people like Dr. King and his dear wife, Bernice's mom. A mission to realize the vision of Kwame Nkrumah for the total unity and freedom of Africa. This year, as I speak, the government and people of Ghana, the President of Ghana, has declared it the year of return. Many Africans from here have been invited to come back home. Come back home and let us work and think together. It's not going to be easy because we have our share of problems. Yes, we have some tall buildings in some neighborhoods. We have some few industries. We have excellent food, but we are importing a lot of our food. We have about 60% of the land in the continent is still not cultivated. We have 60% of our population is below the age of 25 in Africa. The average African is what? A young person. So we have a lot of work to do. But we are never going to accomplish this work if we work separately. Ghanaians alone, Africans in North America alone, Congolese people alone, Egyptians alone, South Africa alone. The only way we can realize the dream of our fathers and mothers is for us to work together. Unity, exactly. Africa must unite. Kwame Nkrumah said, he didn't say Africa can unite. He didn't say Africa could unite. He said Africa must unite. So, my dear brothers and sisters, let us take today as the beginning of thinking and planning and conscientizing ourselves to return home. You don't have to come back physically, because as we know, everything happens in our thoughts and in our minds. And thank God, the Almighty God, that we are speaking in a church, because it's our consciousness that first of all needs to be free. We will be free. We will be free of poverty, of lack, of dependency, of exploitation, of discrimination, if our consciousness becomes free of all those ills. May the Almighty God guide us. May the Pan-African spirit of our ancestors give us the strength and the courage to do the impossible. Africa must unite. Thank you very much.
On April 16th, 1963, from a jail cell in Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a letter to the local clergy defending his commitment to peaceful, direct action. In this letter, you can see the soul of a patriot, the soul of a man who was destined to change the direction of an entire country. Over time, this letter became very personal to me. I grew up in America in the 60s. Racism was real. Segregation was real. Discrimination was real. I remember how this weighed on my parents. They were simple school teachers. All they wanted was for every child to be treated the same, regardless of where they came from, what their name was, or the color of their skin. Put simply, my dad revered Dr. King. Growing up, I remember my father using Dr. King as an example of a leader that was not afraid to do the right thing. He was not afraid to challenge the status quo and injustice. He was not afraid to teach us how to get along with each other. He also taught us about adversity. As he once said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy, much like today. In 1961, my dad became superintendent of schools in Houston County in Georgia, and he integrated the schools for the first time. It was one of the first schools in the state of Georgia. And the reason he did it, when I asked him, he said it was simply the right thing to do. He did it in the face of great adversity. And he used Dr. King as an example all the way through. And so Dr. King was an inspiration for my father. He gave us hope during some of this country's darkest days. He changed America forever, did Dr. King. Our country has overcome a lot, but there's much yet to be done. We need today to reflect on the ideals of Dr. Martin Luther King, the things he fought for, the things he died for. He often reminded us that what unites us is far greater than what divides us. Though we may talk differently, look different, and have different political views, he would remind us we are at first and last one nation under God. The closing sentence of the Declaration of Independence, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the providence of God, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our futures, our sacred honor. In this Birmingham letter, Dr. King wrote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And my father quoted that more times than I can tell you. The closing words of that 1963 letter are as meaningful today as they were then. Let us all hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away, and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities. And in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty. God bless you for being here. Thank you, God, for Dr. Martin Luther King.
Good morning. I bring you greetings and love. I am so honored to be a participant in the 51st Martin Luther King Annual Commemorative Service, and I'd like to thank Dr. Bernice King and the King family and friends for continuing this tradition as you so graciously carry the mantle for civil and human rights for all. The late Barbara Jordan once said, "A nation is formed by the willingness of each of us to share in the responsibility of upholding the common good." Each of us would not be present today without the courage and sacrifice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the King family's continued commitment to upholding the common good for all. And yet, I am reminded that each and every day, I rise to represent Georgia's 6th Congressional District, and that I could not have done so without the bold vision that Dr. King had, in which each and every man, woman, and child would walk in freedom and purpose to achieve all that they dared to believe that they could be. As we gather here today, I pray that each and every one of us is mindful of our rich heritage and all that we must do to preserve the future for our children and our communities. Our nation is at a crossroads, and we are charged to navigate through its troubled waters with the hope of a better day. Nonetheless, our hope will always remain in the powerful legacy of the King family as we hold dear the dream and walk forward in love, acceptance, and ultimately forgiveness. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I'm Chris Carr, and it is an honor to serve as the Attorney General of Georgia. And let me tell you what an honor it is to be a part of this celebration for Dr. King's 90th birthday, and to bring greetings on behalf of the great state of Georgia. As I said last time, and it is worth repeating, to be able to stand with and before you in this historic church to publicly honor this great man and this native son of Georgia is truly a humbling experience. You know, as I was reflecting today on today and what I might say, I kept thinking about the images of Dr. King that I've seen over the years. Pictures and video clips, murals, the artwork that was put up at the corner of Boulevard and Freedom Parkway before the Olympics in the 90s, the statue that was commemorated at the Capitol in 2017. These images and so many others around our city and state, but not just our city and state, our nation and around the world, testify to one fact: Dr. King is a hero. I was born in 1972, but I'm a history buff, and it goes without saying that during the civil rights movement of the 1960s, which I wasn't alive for, but Dr. King was a hero to millions. Since then, he has become and is a hero to my generation, and he will be a hero for many generations to come. And I suspect, since you are all here today, he's a hero to you as well. The world needs heroes. The world needs people like Dr. King. But what does that mean? What is a hero, and why was Dr. King one? Now, I'm not just a history buff, I'm also a movie buff. And I've read a comic book or two in my day. And I'm well aware that there are plenty of superheroes out there. We all know them. And because we're fortunate enough to live in Atlanta, Georgia, and we are now at the center of the movie universe, we're also at the center of the superhero universe. So thanks to that industry, just so you know, most of the Marvel characters are now Georgia residents. Black Panther, Captain America, Spider-Man. But I'm not talking about those kinds of superheroes. Because as much as we enjoy them on the big or the little screen, or in a comic book, they're simply not real. Dr. King was real. He was a real hero. And now, Merriam-Webster defines a hero as a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage, the central figure in an event, period, or movement, and an object of extreme admiration and devotion. Dr. King exemplified every one of these. His achievements, secured with the help of so many, are immeasurable. His courage, unquestioned. He was the central figure of the civil rights movement. The admiration and devotion shown to him, as evidenced by this celebration and others around the country today, deep, genuine, and real. Truly fitting of an American patriot, an American hero. But what caught my eye, and I will end with today, is this: the definition that referenced noble qualities. And of the many noble qualities it seemed that Dr. King possessed, civility and humility quickly come to mind. When I think back on the video and the audio clips of Dr. King, he may always have been passionate, but he was always civil. He may have been upset, but he was always civil. He may have disagreed with you, but he was civil. And he was always humble. It was never about I, it was always about we. And so on February 4th, 1968, from the pulpit of this very congregation, Dr. King preached about what might happen if he died. What he would have wanted to have said, and this is what he told this congregation. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. That's not important. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. Tell them I'd like for somebody to say that Martin Luther King tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that he tried to be right on the war question. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. Happy 90th birthday, Dr. King, and thank you for showing us what it truly means to be a hero.
In his autobiography of spiritual development, a small essay that he wrote for a professor in graduate school, Dr. King admits that when he came to make that decision for himself, to follow the one who is our Lord and Liberator, that he was not overcome by some overwhelming spiritual experience. He was raised in the church, and the day he decided to join the church, the only reason he joined was because he saw his big sister come down the aisle and he wasn't going to let her get in front of him. That big sister is still with us. She's 91 years old. She is the longest serving member of Ebenezer Baptist Church. She's our Queen Mother, and we love her to life, Willie Christine King Farris. Let's hear it from Mrs. Farris. We love you, and we thank God for you. And all of us are still trying to keep up with you. As I think about your brother and our leader, In recent days, I have come again to a scripture that I've known all my life and one that Dr. King often lifted in his speeches and sermons. Words from the book of Isaiah: every valley shall be exalted, every mountain and hill brought low, the crooked places made straight, and the rough places plain. The glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. And so in these difficult days, in this time of narrow vision and petty politicians, God calls us to broaden our vision, to expand our moral imagination, and to dare to dream. Isaiah lays out what I call a moral topography, a view of the land that upsets the status quo. Valleys are exalted, mountains and hills are made low. It is a leveling of the playing field, and God knows we need that now, because we live in a time where those who sit high sit very high, and those who sit low sit way too low, that wages are frozen for American workers. We need valleys to be exalted, and we need mountains to be made low. We need a leveling of the playing field, and in order to achieve this, we cannot allow ourselves to be fooled, distracted, or deceived. Because when that happens, people who ought to be standing together, building a bridge that celebrates our humanity, end up foolishly supporting a wall that separates our humanity. And so let's be clear. There is a tragic irony in all of this foolish talk about a wall. In a broken world, you need borders, but walls blur our vision. And the truth is, American workers live above the border and below the poverty line. And their wages are not pulled down by brown-skinned people on the other side of the border. Racism and white supremacy and cold speech are still very much with us. Don't be fooled. Don't be distracted. Your wages are not being pulled down by workers trying to get across the border, but are forced down by the same corporatist elites who work on both sides of the border in a global world. The high sit very high, the low sit very low. The rich are getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer. It's a national problem. It's an international problem. And while we celebrate Atlanta, the cradle of the civil rights movement, if we really love Atlanta and all of the people of Atlanta, we ought to be concerned that the cradle of the civil rights movement is also the capital of income inequality in this country today. That the wealth gap is too large, and so we can't leave this burden on our mayor. We've got to dig in and work with her. Thank God that she thought it not robbery to get rid of cash bail, wealth-based detention in Atlanta. That's the spirit, and those are the values of Atlanta. But we need more affordable housing in Atlanta. We need the living wage to come to all of our citizens. We need black and brown children, no matter what zip code they live in, to know that in Atlanta they can make it, because this is the city of the dreamer. Atlanta, I know that you're the city too busy to hate, but make sure that you're not the city too busy to love all of our children, to lift all of our children, to encourage all of our children. We've got high places. We've got low places. And God knows in America today we've got too many crooked places. Fake news and alternative facts. Crooked places. lies and more lies, and then some other lies to cover the lies that you forgot you told. Crooked places. And right here in Georgia, we've witnessed politicians presiding over their own elections. Some say, Reverend, be civil. Would Dr. King do that? Go back and listen to his speech, where he talked about a governor whose lips were dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. We've got politicians refusing to resign so that they might referee their own race, serving as umpire and player. Our democracy is better than that. Crooked places. Voter suppression and voter intimidation represents crooked places, and I stand on behalf of the God of love and justice who says that all the crooked places need to be made straight. Too many crooked places. I'm glad that Bryan Stevenson is here because he knows that in America, you're better off being guilty and rich than poor and innocent. Eric Garner had his life literally choked out of him for selling some loose cigarettes on a city street. The underground economy of the poor. Meanwhile, Wall Street bankers destroyed billions of dollars of household wealth through mortgage fraud, almost sent the whole economy over the cliff, and not one banker went to jail. That's not justice, that's crooked places. God promises to make the rough places smooth. And there are those of us who know that while it's dark, we know a God who can make the rough places smooth. That's the testimony of the black church. They gave us a religion intended to make us docile and obedient. But we weren't simply converted to Christianity. We converted Christianity and made it a liberating faith. And out of that tradition, out of that tradition came Ebenezer. And out of Ebenezer came Martin Luther King Jr. And he stood and made America better. God knows how to make the rough places smooth, so that all flesh might see it together. Let's stand together. Walls block our vision and create division. I cannot be all that I ought to be until you are all that you ought to be, and you cannot be all that you ought to be until I am all that I ought to be. And in this struggle, I must admit that there are days when I get discouraged. And when that happens, I just look up. And because I'm a preacher, I'd like to tell you that when I look up, I see some grand vision of God, and the finger of God writing across the milky deep in Hebrew and Aramaic and Greek. But the truth is, usually all I see is birds flying by. But I like to see geese fly because geese fly in a V formation. Geese fly together. And the one out front is actually working the hardest. But what I like about geese is that when the one out front grows tired, he or she just moves toward the back of the formation. And another one moves in its place. And the powerful thing about geese is they do this without a war. They do this without a church schism. Geese fly together. Some are on the left and others are on the right, but they don't decide to stop flying and shut the whole geese government down. And so we're not asking too much of our politicians these days. We're just asking you to have as much sense as a goose. 800,000 federal workers used as pawns. Show us that you have as much sense as a goose. Geese understand that our collective destination is more important than my individual location. And so we got to walk together. We got to stand together. We got to work together. We got to organize together. We got to pray together. We've got to stay together until every valley is exalted, until the mountains and hills are made low, the crooked places are made straight, and the rough places are made plain, and the glory of the Lord is revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. I will forgive their sins, and I will heal the land.
We need to hear from heaven. I said we need to hear from heaven. If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves, pray, repent, turn from your wicked ways, seek his face, then we will hear from heaven. Let us pray. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory
Come on, check, check. Check, one. 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 Check. There he is. Now, you know, we can't just move past that moment. Come on, would you lift your hand just in this building right now? Would you lift your hands and just praise him just for a second? Come on, draw near to him. Yeah. Just take that moment. God, we love you. We praise you. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. His presence is in this place. I said his presence is in this place. I stand here today as a product of the King family that invested in me as a young man. People like Angela and Alveda and Ferris, Delise and Dr. Bernice King. They invested in me when I was crazy, and I needed them. What concerns me about where we are now is that this generation doesn't have many people investing in them. Hip-hop is the largest genre in the world, and as much as I love to bounce and turn up, many of the songs are degrading our women, promoting violence, and keeping us in a mentality of poverty. What we see is a gap in the generation. And it's indicative of the King legacy not fully being what it needs to be in our time. It's the reason we do this, because we've got to get it into the next generation. That's why I'm so excited that we have leaders like Connie F. Smith, who has created a choral performance of Dr. King's speech with the next generation. It'll be led by Miss Ferris Christine Watkins, one of the youngest members of the King family. We love you. That's right, she is. And it'll be followed by a rap by Ray Emanuel. Let's celebrate the next generation in this moment.
Good morning. I am Ferris Christine Watkins, a graduating senior at Spelman College. I am also the great niece of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the great granddaughter of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Sr., and the great great granddaughter of the Reverend Dr. Adam Daniel Williams. I come from generations of freedom fighters, and the fight for freedom continues. Today, we celebrate what would have been my uncle's 90th birthday, and his message is still the same. On August 28, 1963, my Uncle Martin spoke of his dream to thousands of protesters on the Washington Mall. 2 years earlier, on June 18, 1961, Uncle Martin delivered a speech for the Los Angeles Freedom Rally, organized by the Western Christian Leadership Conference. His speech was called The American Dream. In 1961, he charged America with remembering its own dream. In 1963, he emphasized that point when he said, "I have a dream. It is deeply rooted in the American dream." But what is the American dream? A nation where all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This was the dream that our nation was founded on, established by the Founding Fathers. This is what defines the greatness of America. Uncle Martin said in that 1961 speech that America has a problem, a schizophrenia. America is not being true to her own dream. Sadly, that is still the message today. So let's be true to what you said on paper, America. This is our moral obligation. Let's think about where we are as a nation and all of the challenges still plaguing us: poverty, homelessness, sexism, classism, violence, and racism. Driving while black, talking while black, walking with Skittles in your hand while black, selling lemonade as a kid while black, walking into your home while black, getting coffee at Starbucks while black, and minding your own doggone business while you're black. All of these challenges, and now the American government is shut down. Has the American dream become the American nightmare? Can America be great? As young people from all over the globe lift the words of my Uncle Martin's speech today, I ask you to consider this question: what has happened to the American dream, my brothers and sisters? And what will we do about it? Thank you.
In a little tent, oh, like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come.
Dream. America is essentially a dream. It is a dream of a land where men and women and humanity of all races, of all nationalities and all creeds can live together as brothers and sisters and humanity. The substance of this dream is expressed in these profound words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women and humanity are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
It got real hard living, but Martin wasn't afraid to die. He kept on preaching, teaching, preaching.
One of the first things we notice in this dream is its amazing universalism. It does not say some men, but it says all men. It doesn't say all white men,
but it says all men, which includes black men.
It doesn't say all Gentiles,
but it says all women, which includes Jews.
It doesn't say all Protestants,
but it says all men, which includes Catholics.
That is something else we notice in this dream, which distinguishes democracy in our form of government with other totalitarian systems. It says that there are certain basic rights that are neither conferred by nor derived from the state. In order to discover where they came from, it is necessary to move back behind the dim midst of eternity. They are God-given.
America has been, to use a big word that psychologists and psychiatrists have used, a schizophrenic personality, tragically divided.
Tragically divided. And so often, America has trampled over the dream. So often, America has scarred this noble dream. We look and see certain states saying they will never comply with the law of the land. In doing this, America is scarring the dream. We notice people who merely want to be free being brutalized, homes being bombed, churches being bombed. This is a way of scarring the American dream. We notice people who merely want to exercise their citizenship rights being thrown into jail. This is scarring the American dream. We can hear the voice of a little Emmett Till crying from the rushing waters of Mississippi. This is scarring the American dream. So the Negro is still trampled over by the iron feet of oppression, and so often he has been pushed out of the glittering sunlight of life's July and left standing in the piercing chill of an alpine November. This is scarring the American dream. May I say to you, as has been said so eloquently, this dream is being scarred not only in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, and all the southern states, but it is being scarred in New York, Illinois, and Pennsylvania, and I imagine even in California. Fact is that the Negro all over America is still the last hired and the first fired, and he still can't live where he wants to live and where his money can get him to live.
Today, more than ever before, America is challenged to bring this noble dream into a reality. The fact is that America is challenged today. Even though people are looking all over the world to America, 50 years later. 50 years. And they are wondering what we are going to do about this problem. For the hour is late and the clock of destiny is ticking out. We must act now before it is too late. It is trite but urgently true that if America is to remain a first-class nation, then she must no longer have second-class citizens. No wall, no wall, no wall. It must be solved not merely because it is diplomatically expedient, but because it is morally compelling. This must be said all over the world today.
I would say that there's some things that we must continue to do in order to make the American dream a reality. Through our scientific experience, through our moral and ethical commitment, we must make of this a brotherhood and sisterhood and humanity. We must all learn to live together as brothers, or we'll all perish together as fools. This is what we must learn. And it seems simply that every nation must be concerned about every other nation. Every individual must be concerned about every other individual.
Maybe we've spent far too much of our money in the United States establishing military bases around the world instead of bases of genuine concern and understanding. All I'm saying is simply this, that we are all interrelated. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. As long as there's extreme poverty in this world, no man or woman can be totally rich, even if he or she has $1 billion.
$1 billion?
Strangely enough, I can never be who I ought to be unless you are who you ought to be. You can never be who you ought to be unless I am who I ought to be. This is the way the world is made. This is the interconnected structure of reality. John Donne called it years ago and placed it in graphic terms. No man or woman is an island.
No man or woman is an island.
Entire of itself, every man and woman is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. And therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls.
It tolls for thee, it tolls for me.
This is the meaning of having a world perspective if we ought to realize the American dream.
And the other point is that we must get rid of the notion that there are superior and inferior races. We must make it clear all over this land and all over the world that the doctrine of white supremacy has no basis in anthropology, has no basis in scientific thinking, and has no basis in morality. Now, you know, people used to argue, this thing still gets around, people used to argue that the Negro was inferior by nature. And they went back in the Bible and they would get certain passages from the Bible. It's strange how people would use religion often to justify their prejudices. And they would go back in the Bible and they would say now that the Negro is inferior by nature because of Noah's curse upon the children of Ham. No. So we must get rid of this notion once and for all if we want to realize the dream. We must get rid of that there are superior and inferior races.
We must continue to engage in creative protest, to break down the barriers of segregation and discrimination. Now, I know there are those who are victims of some strange illusion, and they don't believe in the necessity for continued protest. One such illusion is the myth of time. They say, just wait and don't push things. Be patient. Pray and time will work this problem out.
Violently now.
You've heard that, I'm sure. But what these people fail to realize is that time is neutral. It can be used positively or negatively. We've seen this myth at work in the South. The fact is that the segregationist points have made a more effective use of time than some other sources of goodwill, even the federal government. And I am convinced that we may have to repent, not only for the blatant, vitriolic words of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people.
Silence is betrayal. Silence is betrayal. Silence is betrayal.
We must make it clear that the time to do right is now, and that the time is always ripe to do right.
I guess it's true that the law can make a man love me, but religion and education must do that. The law can keep him from lynching me, and I think that's pretty important too. Then we must continue to delve deeper into the philosophy of nonviolent resistance. There is something about this method that has power. And I know there are those who ridicule it occasionally, but it has worked miracles in the South. It has morality with it because it allows us to work to secure moral ends through moral means. This is the morality of it. But it has certain practical consequences. It exposes the moral offenses of the opponent, somehow weakens his morale, and all at the same time working on his conscience. It disarms him, and he just doesn't know what to do with it.
Don't know what to do.
If he puts you in jail, all right. If he doesn't put you in jail, fine. If he beats you up, that's all right. If he doesn't beat you up, that's all right. If he tries to kill you, all right.
The ultimate sacrifice, non-violently now.
You develop the quiet courage of dying if necessary without killing. If he tries to threaten you, all right. All right if he doesn't. There is something about it that causes the opponent not to know what to do. Now, he would know what to do with violence. He could call out the state militia. He could call out the National Guard and kill hundreds and hundreds of innocent people.
Hundreds and hundreds of innocent people.
And argue that they're inciting a riot. They know how to handle violence.
Laquan McDonald, Philando Castile,
Jordan Davis,
Michael Brown,
Anne Frank, Medgar Evers,
Mahatma Gandhi,
John J. Jones,
Sandra Quinn,
Jasmine Barnes,
Leela Alcor, Faraz Hussein, Abinza Kabir.
But they've proven over and over again that they don't know how to handle nonviolence. They try to handle it by throwing us in jails. But what happens? We go into the jails of Jackson, Mississippi, and transform those jails from dungeons of shame into havens of freedom and human dignity.
freedom and human dignity.
They can't stop us.
Can't stop us, can't stop us, can't stop us, can't stop us,
won't stop us.
I believe firmly that this is the way.
And people ask me about it all the time. What do you mean when you tell us to love these people who are beating on us and bombing our homes and kicking our children around? What the world do you mean when you say love such people? And I always have to stop and define the meaning of love.
Love.
Theologians will say that it is the love of God operating within the human heart. When one rises to this level, he loves men, not because he likes them, but he loves every man because God loves him.
Love. And so he rises to the level of hating the system rather than the individual caught up in the system. He loves the person but hates the evil deed. And I think this is what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemies. And I'm happy that he didn't say, like your enemies, because it's pretty difficult to like some people. It's difficult to like people bombing your homes, threatening your children, kicking you about. But Jesus said, love your enemies. Love is greater than like. Love is creative, redemptive goodwill for all men and women and humanity. And somehow I've come to believe this more and more, This is how we'll get out this dark night and make this nation a better nation.
Yes.
This is how we will stand up and allow the opposition to know that we will not accept injustice.
No justice, no peace.
We will stand up against it with our lives.
And we will never stoop down to the level of violence and hatred. And we will come to that point when we will convince him that a new world is emerging. I have a dream.
We will not substitute one tyranny for another, for black supremacy is as dangerous as white supremacy. You see, I am convinced that God is not interested merely in the freedom of just the black men, white men, or yellow men, but God is interested in the freedom of an entire human race and the creation of a society. I believe that with this method and this approach, we will be able to win. And finally, as we struggle, we do not struggle alone. It's difficult sometimes. It's difficult particularly for those who are struggling in the Deep South, facing all the violence and all the suffering. But there is something that consoles us all. It is something that convinces us that our cause is right. Freedom, freedom, I can't move. Freedom, cut me loose. Saying, freedom, freedom, where are you? 'Cause we need freedom too. I break chains all by myself. Only my freedom right in hell. Hey, I'ma keep running. 'Cause a winner don't quit on themselves. We through our struggle.
We, through our struggles, through our suffering, through our sacrifices, will be able to achieve the American dream. This will be the day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestant and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free.
To the people where I'm from, you know I'm right with ya. If you really want it, I won't have to come and get ya. 'Cause at the same time, I've been inside of my mind. And another time, steady been working on my rhymes. I'll never forget the lessons that I learned, the friendships that I built, and the bridges that I burned. Thank everybody that gave me the true support. I think about it daily, and I'm really thankful for it. To the ones that doubted me, I just wish you blessings. I'm working for support, got no time for the stressing over people when I'm trying to get rid of the evil from the people in this world whose mentality be lethal. Not everybody has the best intentions. I learned that the hard way. And when you mention your craft, they will never listen. It's like walking in an endless hallway. If they don't like me, that's okay. Regardless, I'ma still be right. Success is better than revenge. The goal isn't to make them salty in the first place. Living in the worst way, some people are. But you have to realize who you really are. Even though life beat us up, left me with a black eye, I ain't negative. I refuse to be that guy. Odds already against me as a young black guy. Dreads in my head and not seen as a threat, but I'm a real good kid. If you look inside my head, this type of foreign message, we can all be well fed if we listen. Sometimes people don't ever want to listen. High crime city rate, bills due the other day. Don't ever hesitate, pray and meditate on your problems and they start to evaporate. I'm living proof when I'm in the booth. It made me feel like I can't lose. The first step towards your future is up to you. So what you want to do, it's your turn to make a move. Don't get stuck in the groove or get too comfortable. Whatever you do, know who you are. Talk to God or whatever you believe in. 2-step, 4-step, it's like a sequence. It feel like I'm dreaming.
My poor little children one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day.
Why can't everybody just love? The kind that was exemplified and sent from up above. Don't know about everybody else, but I know about me. Just want to live my life and see that God is part of me. Look, honestly, I just want to be a good person. Tell me why there's people that love to see people hurting. Tell me why there's people that want to see people bleed. Why can't we just learn from the horrific things we've seen? Be glad that it ain't you, although it easily could be. If I say something wrong, then here is my apology. Just want to spread a message that everybody should hear. It shouldn't be a goal to leave anybody in tears. We should build each other up instead of tear each other down. Instead of getting shady when some people come around. I looked inside my life and I really like what I found. My life is really good because the people that I surround myself with laugh, play around, love each other just as it should be. Regardless of my race, all of my friends accepting me for me. This is how the world should be. Why can't it just be like this? Guess we'll just observe the improvements until our stories end. I just want to see us get better as far as state of mind. But in order for that to happen, have to take some time to realize that this life is a grind and we can't do it by ourselves. We need each other to survive. Why can't everyone just get along, be peaceful? Why don't they understand everybody equal? Yeah, why don't they understand everybody equal? All I know is that all of this ignorance has got to go. Why can't everyone just get along, be peaceful? Why it seem like nowadays everybody evil? And why don't they understand everybody equal? All I know is that all of this ignorance has got to go. Why can't everybody just love? It's a question that I ask myself quite often. And I feel in my mind that the solution is pretty simple. If everybody would just unite and come together, this world can come to what its intended purpose really was. So let's come together and make Dr. King proud. Thank you.
Dr. King said that our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about the things that matter. I want to thank these young adults and this young brother, Rapper Ray Emanuel, for reminding us that we can be silent no longer. Rapper Ray reminds us that whatever you do, don't forget who you are. And in the midst of that, remember that we all need each other to survive. So in this moment, when we think about who we are as a United States of America and a world under God's hand and love, may we always speak up about the love in one another. Way we do, as Dr. King said, call out the God in each other. As we remember Dr. King, it means nothing if our behavior doesn't also reflect his words. We are very honored and grateful to have with us quite a few special people. So I'd like to acknowledge them and acknowledge them by category for the sake of time. With all of our, and as I do so that we can preserve the time, I'm going to ask you to stand and then be seated, ask you to stand and then be seated, and no applause in between. We'll just give everybody a hand at the end. Amen? So can all dignitaries and elected officials please stand? And that would include our other senators, Senator Johnny Isakson, who's with us, all other elected officials and dignitaries, won't you please stand? Wonderful. As they take their seats with the members of the Atlanta Consular Corps and ambassadors, please stand. Great having you. All of the college and university presidents and deans, won't you please stand, that we might acknowledge you. Thank you for being here. The King Center partners and event sponsors, won't you please stand? The 2019 King Center honorees and award recipients, won't you please stand? Corporations and foundation leaders, won't you please stand? Wonderful. Thank you for being with us. Civic community and faith leaders, won't you please stand? A house full. Wonderful. Ground crew, foot soldiers, and veterans of the movement, won't you please stand? Wonderful, wonderful. The Martin Luther King National Park Service, those of you with us, won't you please stand? Great having you. And the King Ferris family, including again Dr. Christine King Ferris, and Aunt Naomi King, the widow of A.D. King, won't you please stand? And we can applaud on this one. We are so grateful to the King and Ferris family for sharing the legacy of their great brother, uncle, and father. The King Center staff and team, won't you please stand? And they are making all of this possible. On the side, won't you please stand? Thank you. King Center volunteers. Wonderful. And finally, Pastor Warnock and your family and the Ebenezer family. Just give a wave. Wonderful. And we truly acknowledge every single one of you seated in this place. We are so grateful to have you here as we continue to honor the legacy of this great man.
Usually in every resistance, you have about 3 different types of people represented. You have your agitators, you have your negotiators, and you have your reconcilers. And oftentimes, the 3 of them tend not to like each other. The ones that reconcile tend to think the agitators are too much. The agitators tend to think the negotiators are too soft. But the truth of the matter is that we need all. And if you get lucky, you become all in one, and that's what Dr. King was. He would agitate, he would negotiate, and here's the big one that some of us don't like, he would reconcile. We have to unify. We can't get stuck in agitating all of the time and forsake the mission that is that all of us must be one. Let's move into our tributes because these folks represent one of these categories. The Reverend Dr. Billy Kim will come first, and then Miss Emma Gonzalez, who was an incredible speaker at the March for Our Lives. She's incredible. We're so honored to have her with us. The great Reverend Jensen Franklin is in the building. Excited about him. And then Miss Brittany Packnett out of Ferguson. Let us have our tributes now.
Happy birthday, Dr. King. I thought it was his birthday today. Let's say big birthday. Happy birthday, Dr. King. Dr. Bernice King, ladies and gentlemen, and the family and friends of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. It's a great honor for Korean Children's Choir and myself to be here, and I trust that you never know the influence of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. for all the preachers around the world. When they suffer freedom, when they suffer persecution, Dr. King is an inspiration. Dr. King was one of the model for all of us preachers to follow, to fight the freedom for the individual. Scripture tells us, beloved, if God so loved us, we ought to also love one another. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And that's been Dr. King's fight for all of his life. Freedom is not free. Somebody has to sacrifice, and Dr. King has sacrificed his life. Everybody have a freedom. Free, free, at last, free. And I want to be grateful to inspiring all of us ministers around the world as Dr. King has done. Winston Churchill, one man convinced England they could survive the Nazi war machine. Vince Lombardi, a one man, turned the Green Bay Packers from NFL doormats into legendary champions. Lee Iacocca, one man, turned the Chrysler around and saved the company. Florence Nightingale, one woman, the mother of modern nursing, transformed the care of patients by emphasizing sanitary design and hygiene in the hospital practice that carry over today. In 1645, one vote gave Oliver Cromwell control of England. 1845, one vote brought Texas into union. 1868, one vote saved the President Andrew Johnson from impeachment. 1875, one vote changed the French monarch to republic. When Dr. King said in his speech, I have a dream about integrating the school system in this country. And that been fulfilled. As Baptist minister from Korea, I have a dream that the North Korean children someday will come sing with the South Korean children to praise God, because that's my dream. Dr. King inspired so many preachers when he preached about, I have a dream. I have another dream that some time in near future, South Korea and North Korea be reunited for the kingdom of God and the peace and the freedom of the people who's been oppressed so long, so far. I want to go on behalf of Korean people, thank you for Korean War veterans who came to rescue South Korea from North Korea communist regime. If you didn't come to Korea to rescue South Korea, those children would have an opportunity to come here, say, God bless America. May God continue to bless this great nation. And you have known many, many people around the world, the one person that who influenced more preachers, perhaps Dr. Billy Graham and Dr. King. I admire those two men because they inspire young preachers who coming up from seminaries and Bible colleges stand up for freedom, because freedom is not free. You never heard fellow named Sergeant Carl Powers. A young soldier went to Korea during the Korean War back in 1950. He ran to Korean houseboy, and he brought that houseboy to the United States, give him an education. That houseboy never attended church. He never heard the gospel. But this soldier sent him to Bob Jones Academy in Greenville, South Carolina. He got converted there, prepared for the ministry, went back to Korea, told his people about Jesus Christ and his saving grace. Billy Graham came 1973 to hold the crusade in Seoul. Final meeting of Dr. Billy Graham, he had 1.1 million people gather at Yeouido Plaza. He cannot give invitation because there's so many people. So he said, if you want to trust Christ, stand up. And the counselors go around, got their name and address that Sunday afternoon. 38,000 people made the decision for Christ. Out of 1 million people, only 5% could understand. But we saw somebody stand next to him to interpret Dr. Billy Graham's message. There was that houseboy, the Sergeant Carl Powers, brought this country, gave him an education, sent him to his country to translate for Dr. Billy Graham. The Korea megachurch movement started since Dr. Billy Graham's crusade. And if Dr. Martin Luther King lived long enough, we would love to have him in Korea to fight for freedom against the communism. God bless Dr. Martin Luther King. He's in heaven looking over, and I hope his legacy will live on, that you and I will continue to fight freedom for the people are suffering. God bless. Thank you.
I did not know Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. because he lived before me, and I'm a child. I do, however, know his family, and I know his children and their children, and though I know them a little bit, and they only know me equally so, they've asked me to speak here today on the holiday named after their father, grandfather, and for that I'm most thankful and humbled. The King family have a sort of calmness and strength about them. At least it's something that I've noticed in the few times that I've been with them personally. And it's a calmness that I've never forgotten and I think about on a daily basis. It's brought back up within my soul when I think of the speech Mr. King gave that became the I Have a Dream speech. I think about that speech a lot because in my English class in 11th grade we had to annotate it. When I think of that experience of annotating, I don't remember feeling bored, like when I had to annotate Ralph Waldo Emerson's pieces. I feel strong and emotional and passionate and a little embarrassed because I definitely analyzed way too deeply. I remember my friend Heather and I annotated together, and I remember how I explained things to her and she explained things to me, and how we shook free from these 5 pages of black and white words, a tapestry of adjectives and imagery so strong you could feel the crushing weight of segregation through the words themselves. He had a way with words, he really did. He explained the problems that black people faced and still face in a way that made it clear to everyone involved that there is only one solution that can correct all of this. I try to be like him in that way and try to think when using words the way his were and the impact they had. Millions of people all around this country look up to this man, even though the majority did not used to. The Peace Warriors of North Lawndale Prep and the members of the youth group Brave are 2 school-centered organizations in Chicago that take the words of Mr. King to heart. They follow the 6 principles of nonviolence and act on them in every day. Some representatives of the club came to my house after the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, and they taught all the members of March for Our Lives how to sustain the movement we were creating on love and not anger, which is all what we were feeling, and how to make sure that we addressed all areas of gun violence in our fight against it, because we're not just fighting against school shootings, we're fighting against gun violence everywhere, because injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. They taught us the 6 principles and gave us dog tags with principles on them whenever we recited them from memory, and I still can, and it was a beautiful experience. I felt heavy with knowledge and emotions that I couldn't speak, and this is the way that I feel when I think about the King family. The words nobility, wisdom, honesty, and strength come to mind when their names are spoken, and I'm forever thankful for the impact their family has had on this country, because without them, I don't need to say how much worse this nation would be. The words of Dr. King saved lives, and so did his actions. He brought about a future where nonviolent protesting is utilized at a grand scale and even looked forward to by many as a way of public and civil engagement with our government. With his words and actions as guidelines to us all in things as small as holding the door for someone who can't for themselves, or attacking the forces of evil at their source and not the persons of evil, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. prepared all future generations with the strength to do what's right. And I just wanted to say that I'm very, very grateful that Yolanda King, the youngest, was able to join us on the March for Our Lives, and Jacqueline Corin, who I work with on a daily basis, just like walked over to her and held her hand and said, "I have a guest for everybody," and everybody lost their mind when they saw that it was her. And she started a little black girl and a little white girl holding hands in front of millions of people around the country and around the world, started chanting together about how we're going to make the nation better together, and I'm thankful for that.
It's an extreme honor to be here today. I'm humbled at this opportunity. I give honor to the King family. We love you. We appreciate you. And this opportunity to give tribute to Dr. King is something very precious to me. I heard a story somewhere about a missionary who went to an island. While he was at the island, he had his first Christmas, and he gathered some of his converts, and he told them the Christmas story of how the wise men brought the gold and frankincense and myrrh, and how that in America, to celebrate Christmas, we exchange gifts. And one of those natives that heard that story came the next day and presented this pastor with a seashell. And the pastor said, "Thank you very much. It was a beautiful seashell," but to him it was just a seashell. And later that day, he showed it to some people on the island, and they said, "Where did you get that from? Do you understand how rare that seashell is? That seashell can only be attained by going on a 5-mile dangerous trek across to the further side of the island over volcanic rock. You're going to cut your feet. You're going to get hurt. And nobody can get those shells without a long walk. You need to appreciate the long walk of the gift you have received." So later, the missionary said to the man that gave him the seashell, "I want to really thank you." And his answer was, "It's okay, Pastor. On this island, we understand that the long walk is part of the gift." When I think about Dr. King and the amazing gift that he was to our nation, when I think about the ability to speak and move hearts and move minds and move people, what a gift of communication, what a gift of leadership, what a gift of anointing and prophecy that he proclaimed from this pulpit. But you really can't appreciate the gift if you neglect the long walk. When I think about the long walk of Dr. King, I think about how that he would pack his bags and kiss his wife goodbye and see his children and wonder and hug them and wonder if he'd ever see them again. But the long walk was part of the gift. When I think about how that he would march from Selma to Montgomery for 5 days and 54 miles, and he marched and walked through tear gas and through brutality and through profanity and name calling and every way that people could put him down. But it wasn't just the gift, it was the long walk that was part of the gift of Dr. King. When I think about how that he probably laid in hotel rooms feeling the weight, feeling the mantle of justice and freedom for all, and how he probably tossed and turned in sleepless nights, how any of us who speak for a living have our stomachs turning on Sunday morning and almost feel nauseated at times. I wonder how many times with a worldwide pulpit, the pressure that was on that man, but that was part of the long walk that we honor. The long walk was part of the gift. When I think about that baby that was born in Bethlehem, when I think about that unique gift, it was beautiful. It was God in skin. His name was Jesus. But it was the long walk that was part of the gift. For 30 years, he never preached a sermon. He never healed a person. He just stood and he lived a normal life in a blue-collar family. And he just lived normal and average so that he could identify with you and me. And the long walk was part of the gift. When I see that gift hanging on a cross 3 years later, bleeding and dying and carrying the sins of this nation, the sins of racism and hate and unforgiveness and bitterness. When I see that gift hanging on that cross, I can't help but think that the long walk from Gethsemane, where his sweat became like drops of blood, all the way down the Via della Rosa, dragging that cross. And when the cross became so heavy that he collapsed under the weight, there was a black man, Simon of Cyrene, who picked up the cross. The first human being to ever have the blood of atonement applied to his life was a black man who carried the cross of Jesus Christ. And I say to you in conclusion today, as we remember Dr. King and the one that he followed, the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, that if you ever present a gift to this world, it won't be your talent, because people are into talent, but God's into character. It's not enough to have a gift. You got to walk the walk. You got to live the life, because the walk is a part of our gift. And one day, when we stand before the throne of God and we take our crowns and we cast our gifts at the feet, those nail-scarred feet of Jesus, the Father will not just see the gift, but he'll see every tear. He'll see every sorrow. He'll see every trial. He'll see every heartbreak. He'll see every time you forgave. He'll see every time you loved like you had never been hurt. And he'll say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." We honor you, Dr. King. Thank you for the long walk and the gift.
Amen. 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 Good afternoon. Oh, now we're in God's house. We can do better than that. Good afternoon. I bring greetings to the shepherd of this house, to the King family, and Reverend Dr. King. I have to say thank you for being as powerful a leader as you are a prolific tweeter. Because you have recognized that a new generation needs the light of this family and this legacy shined upon it. And so you take the time to do that in 140 characters, 280 characters, and every single day. And I'm grateful for all of the guidance that you give us. Now, my name is Brittany Packnett. I'm an activist, an educator, and a writer. I have been tear gassed on the streets of Ferguson and pepper sprayed in South St. Louis. I've sat at Barack Obama's right hand and at my friend Bryan Stevenson's left hand, but through it all, no matter where I am a straight up, unapologetic, unrepentant black church girl. I'm Baptist through and through. My father was a pastor, my mother is ordained, and my brother is licensed. I probably spent more time in church than I did at home or at school, and it always feels right to be in God's house on this day. Growing up, I always knew it was going to be a good Sunday when the choir would decide not to just show up in the choir stand, but do that processional right through the middle aisle. You know what I'm talking about? I believe this brother over here would have been right in the front of the line. Hallelujah. Yes. Yes, indeed. You know, they would come in wearing not the everyday robes, but the good robes, right? And they'd have a fancy clap and a two-step for Jesus, and they'd march on beat into the choir stand. And I was always excited when they would get up there and sing my favorite Baptist call to worship. They'd say, "He didn't have to let me live. He didn't have to let me live. But I'm glad to be in the service one more time." Now, I'll be honest, I grew up loving that song because it was lively and joyful. And because Miss Pat would get happy and she would shout so hard that her glasses would come off and we would take bets on which row they would end up in. Sometimes a wig would come off too, hallelujah. But I know that as a child, I was excited because I looked forward as a child to the performance
of faith. But as I got older, I had no choice but to do what the good book says and put away childish things. You see, my dad was a professor of Black liberation theology and Black church history, so every week he uncovered the necessity of the Black church, not just as a house of worship, but as an institution of Black agency, responsible for helping shift this entire country onto a pathway of justice. He'd stand in front of eager college students who at once were probably just as entranced by the theatrics of church as I was. And sitting in the back of those classes, I came to quickly learn a couple of things that have been central to my own journey as an activist committed to the eternal struggle of freedom. And because my parents trained me in the way that I should go, I was never confused about two things. One, Jesus had kinky hair just like I do, up under here. And two, that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., before all else, was an unyielding, unapologetic, and unashamed servant of the King and preacher of the gospel. Under my father's tutelage, and my brother and I, we studied Dr. King's work, of course, but we also studied his sermons and his prayers. And as I stand before you today in this hallowed pulpit, in this historic congregation, I'm just glad to be in the service one more time, and one prayer in particular comes to mind. Dr. King said, "Oh God, we thank you for the lives of great saints and prophets in the past, who have revealed to us that we can stand up amid the problems and difficulties of the trials of life and not give in. We thank you for our foreparents who've given us something in the midst of darkness and exploitation and oppression to keep going. Grant that we will go on with the proper faith and the proper determination so that we will be able to make a creative contribution to this world. In the name and spirit of Jesus, we pray. Let the church say, amen." You see, this prayer strikes me on today in particular because Dr. King speaks of the ancestors as he now has become one. He speaks gratitude to those foremothers and forefathers who dug wells from which future generations would drink and planted trees where unknown and yet unborn children would find our shade. He knew that our ancestors had to do far more with far less than we have now, that they had to be brighter in times of greater darkness, that they pressed toward the mark of high callings that they would never even see, just to give us permission to do the same. This is a day of commemoration, a day of reflection, a day to honor one of the greatest ancestors we have been blessed to claim. And on this morning, in churches and synagogues and mosques and parks and school gymnasiums and community centers and homeless shelters and living rooms across the country, people are asking themselves and one another what Dr. King, our beloved ancestor, would think of us today. They are asking what he'd think of walls and shutdowns and the politics of exclusion. They are wondering what he'd think about Flint, which still doesn't have any clean water, and Palestine, Israel, and Ferguson. They're pondering what he'd make of young men shouting at indigenous elders on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, a symbol of freedom. They're asking one another what Dr. King would have to say about Me Too and AK-47s and Jasmine Barnes and families separated at borders and reservations and prisons and jails. And now I do believe that the ancestors love it when we remember them, when we praise their labor and sing of their triumphs. I believe they like it when we praise God for the ancestors with the saxophone and the cymbal. I'm sure they smile at the pomp and they appreciate the circumstance. But if Dr. King were here right now celebrating 90 years on this earth, deep down something in that prayer tells me that he wouldn't nearly want us spending this much time pondering that at all. I believe that our foremothers and our forefathers' greatest aspirations for us is not merely to ask what our ancestors think of us, but to ask of ourselves, what kind of ancestor are we becoming? You see, the greatest honor to Dr. King's legacy is not a self-congratulatory look behind, but a self-convicting look ahead. Our ancestors kept their hand on the plow, not for us to spend all our God-given time in a navel gaze, looking with admiration and sweet nostalgia about how far we've come, but to get busy working on just how far we've got to go. What kind of ancestor are you becoming? What are you giving your children and your children's children and your children's children's children and your neighbor's children that they can take with them in the midst of darkness and exploitation and oppression to keep going? Are you giving them clean water? Are you ensuring their quality education? Are you ensuring your home is inviting for whomever they love? Are you teaching them love and power or greed and selfishness? Are you providing them the language of truth and reconciliation or of privilege and domination? Are you showing them how to be a danger to injustice, or is supremacy actually quite comfortable around you? What kind of ancestor are you becoming? Are you choosing comfort or are you choosing courage? Do you think that this actually doesn't all apply to you because you don't wear a white hood or have a swastika tattooed on you? Or do you realize that you don't have to be a supremacist to benefit from supremacy? Do you remember that you aren't free until I am free, that our fates are inextricably bound, and that until every one of us who wants a job has a job, and until every laborer makes a living wage, and no more women actually have to say me too, and no more elders sleep in the cold, and no more children sleep in the dark, and until every last drop of water is safe to drink, until every vote is counted, until elections stop getting tampered with, until bills to build walls are withdrawn, that none of us are free. What kind of ancestor are you becoming? Are you just glad to be in the service, or are you glad to be of service? Do you know about what Jesus said about the poor and the sick and the immigrant, just like you know what he said about prospering you? Does your faith last beyond a singular, questionably elected president or a governor, or will it fade after 2020? Do you believe God to be big enough to grant everyone's freedom, or just yours? So as I take my seats, know this: our greatest ancestors aren't created in moments of pomp and circumstance, comfort, convenience, or commemoration. They are born of the fire, and they make their flesh into iron. So I ask you, what kind of ancestor are you becoming? And when Monday is over and another holiday is in the books and the services have ended and the commemorations are done, ask yourself that question again. Because I know who we all are on MLK Monday, when the lights are on and the work is off and the opportunity for justice is placed squarely in the palm of your hand. I'm not concerned with who you are on MLK Monday. I'm concerned with, and I want to know who we are on a regular old Tuesday, when you have to go out and do the work, when you have to place yourself between the lion and the lamb, between the oppressor and the oppressed, when you've got to check some family members, when you've got to make some enemies, and when you've got to lose some friends. Will you still be glad to be of service? Will you still be glad to be in the service? I'm glad to be in the service on today and charge us to choose every day with great intention to become the kind of ancestors that would honor a king. Thank you, Dr. King. God bless you.
You may be known as an activist, an artist, and a writer, but I heard a little preach come on in there. I'm just saying, it's a lioness recognizes a lioness. I thank Brittany Packnett for the exclamation point to the tributes, and what a wonderful bridge to this now tribute of Mrs. Coretta Scott King. Way back in the book called Genesis, the Lord gave a vision to a man named Abraham, that he was to be the father of nations. But isn't it something so powerful to note that Abraham couldn't birth the vision by himself? For it literally and figuratively took Sarah to bring forth Isaac. In likewise the same manner, Dr. King was given a dream and a vision, but he didn't birth it all by himself. For it was with his wife, Coretta Scott King, that the legacy was birthed, and we are now taking part of their feast. For Coretta Scott King did not only birth 4 children, and all while birthing on that long journey, Pastor Franklin, she also had in mind the birthing of a legacy. For she knew and recorded Dr. King in instances when no one else was recording him, because she knew that this dream was much bigger than him or her. Today we stand not only to honor a great man, but we stand to honor a great woman. A true patriot insists that its country lives its ideals, and Coretta Scott King is that true patriot. As Sojourner Truth quipped some 100 years ago, that if it took a woman all by herself to turn the world upside down, then as we saw marching women yesterday and loud women in the Congress today, we shall all know that it takes all of us women and men together to turn this world right side up. The legacy of Coretta Scott King continues, and Miss Ayanna Prather, a senior at Coretta Scott King Young Women's Leadership Academy, is here to bring such tribute.
Hate is too great a burden to bear, for it injures the hater more than it injures the hated. Those are the words of Mrs. Coretta Scott King. Good afternoon. I am Ayanna Danielle Prather, and I reign from the Coretta Scott King Young Women's Leadership Academy. And much like Mrs. King, I too serve as my class valedictorian. Thank you. Mrs. Coretta Scott King, wife, mother, author, musician, but of all these things, I call you today to remember her life and legacy as a civil rights activist and leader. Today, I stand on her shoulders, still in search of a more perfect union as established by the United States Constitution. So I begin with asking why, in recent years, it seems as though our country has been able to successfully coexist with a substantial amount of hate. I welcome you all to an unconsciously biased America where safety and sanity continues to be questioned. America, ill in her ways, has watched this country become more, some may argue, just as divided as before. And today, we must address the reasons why. Could it be that while the victims may change, their motives of hatred and fear have remained the same? Could it be that the hatred in their hearts has never left? Or could it be that they have been fueled by the bigoted, misogynistic, xenophobic beliefs of the one who leads? See, the Charleston shooting should have been the last time we heard of a mass church shooting. But 4 years later, we witnessed a synagogue massacre. Apparently, we were not loud enough 4 years ago when we screamed the names of Philando Castile, Mike Brown, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, because now we are screaming Botham Jean, Emmenatic Bradford Jr., and for the police to start putting their guns down when the threat is only skin deep. See, if Mrs. King were alive today, I am certain she too would ponder on the same questions that I have recently, such as why are the rights of the LGBT community still being questioned? How much longer will the world be divided on a debate of gun control and gun violence while these kids and their parents fear for their child's education? I'm sorry, I meant their life. Why are votes still being suppressed? Why are we still debating immigration? Did they forget that we were all immigrants in the first place? And a wall?
See, I say to each of you today that I am so sorry that we have had to endure these injustices. But for you, America, I can no longer offer you any of my condolences. You have been able to thrive for too long off of hate. To take the words of Mrs. King, I don't see how we, as human beings, can separate human rights and the rights of people, no matter their sexual orientation or identity. But let me add their race, let me add their religion, let me add their origin, let me add their immigration status. See, my fellow Americans, the theme here today is humanity tied into a single garment of destiny. And it is time for us all to realize that we are one. Until we do so, there will never be any healing. See, America can no longer afford to live off of hate. I will cut the line of life support if I have to. See, the haters think they have more unity than us right now because they can agree on one thing: hate. See, since America missed its first call to action while Dr. King was alive and missed the message of Mrs. King, let me call again. It is time for a change. There is no better time than now. There is no room left for any other time than now. Thank you.
Hallelujah and amen. Many are called, but few are chosen. Bryan Stevenson is definitely one of those chosen in this hour. He is the founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama. He's widely acclaimed public interest lawyer who has dedicated his career to helping the poor, the incarcerated, and the condemned. Under his leadership, EJI has won major legal challenges, eliminating excessive and unfair sentencing, exonerating innocent death row prisoners, confronting abuse of the incarcerated and the mentally ill, and aiding children prosecuted as adults. Mr. Stevenson has successfully argued several cases in the United States Supreme Court and recently won an historic ruling in the United States Supreme Court banning mandatory life without parole sentences for all children 17 or younger as unconstitutional. He is the recipient of numerous awards, especially prestigious awards, and recently in 2018, we awarded him the Nonviolent Peace Prize, Martin Luther King Nonviolent Peace Prize. On last year as well, under his leadership, the Equal Justice Initiative opened what I believe was an extremely timely museum and memorial, the Legacy Museum, from enslavement to mass incarceration, built on the site of a former slave warehouse in downtown Montgomery. It's a companion to a national memorial to victims of lynching, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, which opened at the same time. And I encourage everyone to go and visit. It will open your eyes and you will see America in a different light. I was privileged to be his guest at the opening. And as I heard him speak, I knew that he needed to be with us at this hour. His message penetrates your soul. He speaks on the high plane of dignity and discipline. And for the preachers in the house, maybe we don't have a preacher today, but I'm telling you, we got a prophet. Because prophets see into the future and they understand what's needed in the time that we are in for the future. And that's why he built that particular memorial. And so I introduce to you a man who, like the prophet Jeremiah, has fire shut up in his bones. A man who, like the prophet Isaiah, said, "Here am I, Lord, send me." Bryan Stevenson was born for the assignment that God has given to him. And after our musical selection, Born for This by Minister B.B. Winings, a multi-Grammy award-winning artist, Prophet Bryan Stevenson will give us what thus saith the Lord.
I'm going to do like I was told, and I'm going to sing. You can roll it when you want. Says, why not me? I asked myself. The song I sang off key. Hold back those tears and convince yourself just wasn't meant to be. Some wish wish upon a star in hope. One day that wish comes true. But I'm asking God with much regard, are the dreams I want taboo? Born for this, destined for greatness. Am I prepared for this? Your strength for my weakness. Found that life's not always easy. Question if it's worth the risk. Follow my heart and it will lead me. And yes, I was born for this. Now, I will not go, 'cause they told me no. So there's nothing out there for me. But lying in my bed, couldn't get it out of my head. Am I where I'm supposed to be? Yeah. Can't let the words control my life. My pride I will defend. And if I work hard, won't it take me far? But in the end, will I win? Born for this, destined for greatness. God, give me strength for this. Your strength for my weakness. Found that life's not always easy. Question if it's worth the risk. But follow your word and it will lead me. And yes, I was born for thee. Now if I stay here and wait, my dreams will die. Can't be afraid to try again and fly. And if I ever lose my way, because my heart is torn, I'll never let it question why. The very reason I was born. Oh, 'cause I was born for this. I'm destined for greatness. God, give me strength for this. Your strength for my weakness. Now life's not always easy. Question if it's worth the risk. But follow my heart and it will lead me. Yes, I was born for this. I'm born for this. I'm destined for greatness. He'll give me strength for this. His strength for my weakness. Life's not always easy. Question if it's worth the risk. But follow your word and it will lead me. And yes, I was born for this. It might hurt sometimes, but I was born for this. May have to cry, but I was born for this. There you go.
Amen, amen, amen. Phoebe, thank you, brother. Powerful, powerful, powerful. What an honor to be back at Ebenezer, to be here with you on this extraordinary day. I want to thank the King family, my friend Bernice King, for inviting me. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, to all the elected officials, to all of the people in this space. What an honor it is to have this opportunity to share with you for just just a few minutes. I believe that we have been so inspired today. The music and the witness and the tributes and the testimony, it's given us enough energy and emotion and passion and faith to do great things. And I want to talk about the great things that we have to do, because when we leave this place, we cannot just live on the high time we've had here at Ebenezer. We cannot just exist on the emotions and the thoughts. There are things we have to do. And I want to talk about the things that I believe we have to do if we're really going to honor the life of Dr. King. Dr. King said, true peace is not the mere absence of tension. He said it's the presence of justice. And that means we're going to have to do some work when we leave this place to create justice. People of faith, you know this scripture. Micah says, I ask the question, what does God require from us? And what the scripture tells us is that we love justice, that we do justice, that we love mercy, and that we walk humbly with God. And we need justice right now. When Dr. King was killed in 1968, there were less than 200,000 people in jails and prisons in America. Today, there are 2.3 million people in jails and prisons in America. The United States has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. Dr. King talked about freedom and opportunity, and what we've gotten is jails and prisons and incarceration. We've got 6 million people on probation and parole in this country. There are 70 million Americans with criminal arrests, which means that when they try to get jobs, they get disfavored. They can't get loans. They don't get treated well. We do terrible things to people when they come out of jails and prisons. We disenfranchise them. We take away their vote. We restrict them. We've done terrible things to women in the last quarter century. In the last 25 years, the percentage of women going to jails and prisons has increased 646%. 70% of the women we send to jails and prisons are single parents with minor children, which means that when these moms go to jails and prisons, the lives of their children are disrupted. There's another statistic out there. We don't talk about it, but we need to understand it. The Bureau of Justice now predicts that in this country, 1 in 3 black male babies born is expected to go to jail or prison during his lifetime. 1 in 3. The statistic for Latino boys is 1 in 6. That wasn't true in the 20th century. It wasn't true when Dr. King was living, but it's true today, and we don't talk about it. Our politicians are not debating that issue. They're not talking about that issue. It wasn't a topic during the midterm elections, and we're living in neighborhoods and communities, many of us, where the statistic is even worse. Within blocks of here, the projection is that half of all of the young black boys born in this community are going to end up in jail or prison, and it affects the hopefulness of a community. It affects our ability to achieve the dream. It affects our ability to achieve justice when we're indifferent to this phenomenon. I sit down with little boys, 10, 12, 13-year-olds, and they tell me that they don't expect to be free by the time they're 21. They say, I've got to go out here and get mine while I can, Mr. Stevenson, and this hopelessness is all around us, and we've got to do something if we're going to increase the justice quotient. I didn't come this afternoon to talk about the problems. We know about many of the problems. I've come this afternoon because I think there are some solutions. I think Dr. King is calling us to embrace some solutions, and I've just got 4 things. The first thing I am persuaded we have to do if we're going to honor the life of Dr. King, when we leave this place, we're going to have to get proximate to the poor. We're going to have to get closer to the suffering. We're going to have to visit jails and prisons. We're going to have to find ways to get closer to the marginalized. We cannot stay in places surrounded by the powerful and the privileged and the talented to truly understand Dr. King's legacy. We've got to get closer to the poor, the excluded, the neglected, the disabled, the disfavored. Dr. King died while he was marching for sanitation workers. It was the poor that called him into the streets, and I believe if we're really going to honor his legacy, we've got to make a commitment now to do something about the millions living beneath the federal poverty level. We've got to find ways to get closer to those who are suffering, those who are excluded, those who are neglected. And I'm here to tell you that there is power in this choice to get proximate. I heard about proximity not from studies, not from much. I actually learned about proximity and its power from my grandmother. I talk about my grandmother a lot. My grandmother was one of these traditional African-American matriarchs. She was tough. She was strong. She was powerful. Many of you know these kinds of grandmothers. My grandmother was tough and strong. She was kind and loving, but she was a powerful force. My grandmother was the end of every argument in our family. My grandmother was also the start of a lot of arguments in our family. And my grandmother got worried when integration came to our community. My grandmother was worried about me, and so she started doing this thing when I was about 9 or 10. She would come up to me, and she'd give me these hugs. She'd come up to me, and she'd squeeze me so tightly, I thought she was trying to hurt me. And then my grandmother would see me an hour later, and she'd say, Bryan, do you still feel me hugging you? And if I said no, my grandmother would jump on me again. And by the time I was 10, my grandmother had taught me every time I would see her, the first thing I would do, every time I would see her, I'd say, Mama, I always feel you hugging me. And she'd smile this smile, and I didn't know what she was teaching me until much later in life. She worked as a domestic her whole life. She lived into her 90s, but when she got into her 90s, she fell one day and she broke her hip. She developed cancer, and she was dying. I was a college student when she was dying. I went to see my grandmother, and I sat next to her for an hour, and I was just pouring my heart out. And it was so sad to me because my grandmother meant the world to me. And I was just saying all these things, knowing I wouldn't get a chance to see her again. And I was holding her hands, and it was time for me to go. And I finally stood up to leave, and I was heartbroken and sad. And just before I walked away, my grandmother squeezed my hand, and she opened her eyes. And the last thing my grandmother said to me before I left that space, before I walked away, before she died, she looked at me and she said, Bryan, do you still feel me hugging you? And then she said, I want you to know I'm always going to be hugging you. And I tell you that story because today there are children in this community, there are poor people, there are excluded people, and they need our hug. And I believe Dr. King is calling his people to embrace the poor and the suffering. You don't have to have a degree, you don't have to have a lot of information, but if you have a willing heart, you can wrap your arms around those who are suffering, and that witness is the beginning of the love and the ministry of Dr. King. We've got to get proximate. I believe in the power of proximity, and sometimes the mistake we make, we think we've got to have all the answers before we start helping people who are undocumented, before we start helping people who are dealing with addiction, before we start helping people who are suffering. And I'm here to tell you that the answers can't come before you get there. The answers come in proximity. We learn how to serve when we serve. We learn how to help when we stand close to those who are suffering. There's power in proximity. I'm the product of someone's choice to get proximate. I didn't get here by myself. I started my education in a colored school. When I was a little boy, they didn't let black kids go to the public schools. And the lawyers came into the community, and what excites me about this moment, as I live in Montgomery, Alabama, I drove over here this morning. And in Montgomery, you can't look very far without seeing the work that has been done by the people who have come before us. I'm standing on the shoulders of extraordinary people. They did so much more with so much less. They had to have this witness and this testimony. And people say, oh, your work must be so hard. But my work isn't hard. I've never had to say like the people who came before me, my head is bloodied but not bowed. But because they said it, I get to do what I do. And here what I'm saying to you is that we've got to get closer to those who are still suffering, closer to those who are still struggling. Our witness, our call to action is that we get proximate. Don't just leave here and go places that are comfortable. I need you to go places where there's suffering. But proximity won't be the only thing we have to do. The second thing I believe Dr. King is calling to us to do is that we're going to have to change narratives. You see, there are narratives outside this church. There are narratives outside this service. People don't actually believe a lot of the things that we're talking about today. They don't. They will sometimes applaud, they will smile, but they don't believe actually that we can do better. And we've got to change that narrative. We have mass incarceration in this country because we decided to declare people who are drug addicted and drug dependent. We said those people are criminals. Now, we didn't have to say that. We could have said that drug addiction and drug dependency is a health problem, and we need our healthcare system to respond to that problem. But instead, we said, no, those people are criminals. And because of that, we put hundreds of thousands of people in jails, in prisons. Now, the reason why we did that has to do with the narrative. It was what's underneath that debate that I want us to work on changing. Because underneath that choice, that misguided war on drugs is what I call the politics of fear and anger. We had politicians preaching to us, be afraid and be angry. And we've got politicians today that want us to be governed by fear and anger, and we're going to have to change that narrative, because I'm here to tell you that fear and anger are the essential ingredients of injustice. They fuel oppression, they fuel abuse, they fuel misconduct, and we're going to have to change the narrative. Go anywhere in the world where people are being abused or oppressed. They'll give you a narrative of fear and anger. We've got to change the narrative. We've got to replace it with hope and love, and that's the calling that we have to make. And the narratives have to change, and we've got to still change the narrative about race in America. We're not free in this country. We're burdened by a history of racial inequality. It's created a kind of smog in the air, and it's just everywhere. It doesn't matter whether you're in Georgia or New York or California or Mississippi. There is this corruption, this pollution in the air created by our history of racial injustice, and we've got to talk about that history. We're going to have to say something about this narrative of racial difference that we've all inherited. Dr. King and so many did their part, but now it's our time to do our part. And that means we're going to have some difficult conversations in this country. We're going to have to talk about some things we haven't talked about before. I think we have to talk about the fact that we live in a post-genocide society. You see, we are living in spaces, we're standing on grounds where there was a genocide. When Europeans came to this country, they slaughtered millions of native people. And we don't talk about the native people. We abused them, we starved them, we killed them, we slaughtered them. We made them leave their lands. We kept their words, but we made them leave. Chattahoochee, that's a native word. We're surrounded by all of these native words, but the people were forced to leave. It was a genocide. But we didn't call it a genocide. We created a narrative of racial difference. We said, no, those native people, they're savages. And we used that racial narrative to justify that violence. And we haven't talked about it. And it was that same narrative of racial difference that made us comfortable with 2 centuries of American slavery. You see, I don't think the great evil of American slavery was involuntary servitude and forced labor. I think the true evil of American slavery was the narrative of racial difference that we created to justify it. You see, we made up this ideology of white supremacy. We said that black people aren't as good as white people. We said that black people can't do this, they can't do that, they can't do this, they can't do that. And that narrative of racial difference, that was the true evil of American slavery. And if you read the 13th Amendment, it talks about ending involuntary servitude. It talks about ending forced labor, but it doesn't say anything about ending this narrative of racial difference. And because of that, we've got work to do in this country. We've got to change this narrative of racial difference. I worry sometimes that we got it all wrong in the 19th century. The 13th Amendment didn't deal with the true evil of American slavery, and because of that, slavery didn't end in 1865, it just evolved. It turned into decades of terrorism and violence. And we haven't talked about the terrorism and violence. We're in Fulton County, Georgia. Dozens of people were lynched in this county. We haven't talked about what happened to the black and brown people who lived in this space, but for decades, black people were burned and tortured and mutilated and harassed and lynched, and that terrorism shaped a generation. And our parents and our grandparents had to live with the terror of this violence. And we haven't talked about it. And older people of color come up to me sometimes and say, Mr. Stevenson, I get angry when I hear somebody on TV talking about how we're dealing with domestic terrorism for the first time in our nation's history after 9/11. They said, we grew up with terror. We had to worry about being bombed and lynched and menaced every day of our lives. And we haven't talked about this. We haven't talked about the fact that the demographic geography of America was shaped by racial terrorism. You see, the black people in Cleveland and Chicago and Detroit and Los Angeles and New York and Boston didn't go to those communities as immigrants looking for new economic opportunities. They went to those communities as refugees and exiles from terror in Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi. There's a line from Georgia to the Midwest and the West, and that line is, so we've got to change this narrative, and I'm going to get in trouble here, and I'm sorry already, but I'm going to have to talk to you about the civil rights era too, because I think the narrative needs to change there. I worry when I hear us talking about the civil rights era sometimes. I do. We've gotten too celebratory when we talk about the work that people were doing. I hear people talking about the civil rights movement. It's starting to sound like a 3-day carnival. On day 1, Rosa Parks didn't give up her seat on a bus. On day 2, Dr. King led a march on Washington. And on day 3, we changed all the laws and racism was over.
I wish that were our history, but that's not our history. Our history is that for decades in this country, black people were told you can't vote just because you're black. We were told you can't go to school because you're black. Those signs that said white and colored, they weren't directions. They were assaults. They created injuries, and we haven't treated those injuries, and that narrative of racial difference persisted. And now we're still living at a time where that narrative of racial difference persists. That's the reason why nobody seems to care about those black boys and girls that are destined to go to jail or prison. We don't seem to care about the poor. We don't seem to care about the suffering and the violence, and the narrative of racial difference has to change. There's a presumption in dangerousness that gets assigned to black and brown people, and you can be a dedicated member of Ebenezer. You can have celebrated Dr. King's birthday. You can believe in nonviolence. You can be a talented student. You can be a gifted athlete, but it breaks my heart to have to tell you that if you live in this country and you're black or brown, you will go places where you're going to have to navigate a presumption of dangerousness and guilt. And it starts to weigh on you. It starts to weigh on you. It starts to weigh. I'm in my 50s now. I've been practicing law a long time. And even still, I have to navigate. I was in a courtroom just a couple of years ago. I had my suit and tie on. I was there to do a hearing. I was sitting at defense counsel's table. I got there early. And the judge walked in, and when he saw me sitting at defense counsel's table, he got angry. He looked at me and he said, hey, you get back out there in the hallway. You wait until your lawyer gets here. I don't want any defendants sitting in my courtroom without their lawyer. And I had to stand up and apologize. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Bryan Stevenson. I am the lawyer. And the judge started laughing. And the prosecutor started laughing, and I made myself laugh. And then the client came in, this young white kid I was representing, and we put on our hearing. But afterward, I was thinking, what is it when the judge saw a middle-aged black man in a suit and tie sitting at defense counsel's table? It didn't even occur to him that's the lawyer. What that is this narrative of racial difference. And we have to change the narrative. In South Africa, you can't go there without seeing evidence of the legacy of apartheid. They've built a museum. They've built monuments outside their court. There are monuments and stones committed to making sure that apartheid never remains, never returns. There's a narrative change. When you go to Rwanda, the Rwandans will insist on talking to you about what happened during the genocide. It is urgent for them to get the world to understand the pain and anguish of their suffering and the human rights violations that took place there. Go to Berlin, Germany. In Berlin, you can't go 100 meters without seeing a marker or a stone that's been placed next to the home of a Jewish family that was abducted during the Holocaust. The Germans want you to go to the Holocaust Memorial. They're trying to change the narrative. They don't want to be thought of as Nazis and fascists for the rest of time. They want the narrative to change, but in this country, we haven't talked about slavery. We haven't talked about lynching. We haven't talked about segregation. You start talking about race and people get nervous. You start talking about racial justice, people are looking for the exits, and the narrative has to change. I'm here to tell you today that if we're going to advance Dr. King's legacy, we're going to have to change the narrative. We need truth and reconciliation in America. We do. And what we have to remember is that truth and reconciliation is sequential. You can't get to reconciliation until you first tell the truth. And sometimes people, they hear me and they think I want to punish America for our past. I have no interest in punishing this nation for its history. I'm not interested in punishment. I'm interested in liberation. You see, I believe that truth can resurrect all of the things that are honest and decent. And when we commit ourselves to it, that's how we make the world a better place. That's how we advance Dr. King's narrative. We're going to have to work on these narratives. But even that's not going to be enough. We've got to get proximate. We've got to change narratives, but the third thing we're going to have to do is that we're going to have to stay hopeful. And I say that with a heavy heart because I spend time in faith places, and I worry sometimes because I think we get faith and hope confused. You see, it's easier to be faithful sometimes than it is to be hopeful. You see, we can learn the liturgy. We can actually show up every Sunday. We can know the things to say and when to say them, and then leave the church hopeless about what we can do to change the world. And what I'm saying is that God is calling us to be hopeful. Our hope is our superpower. You see, hope is what gets you to stand up when other people say sit down. Hope is what gets you to speak when other people say, be quiet. I'm actually persuaded that hopelessness is the enemy of justice. Injustice prevails where hopelessness persists. If you want to know something about the life of Dr. King, know that he was a hopeful man. He actually believed by himself with some ministers and students he could go to Selma, Alabama, and justice would prevail. He believed he could go to Birmingham and justice would prevail. There was this hope, and our hope is key. And you've got to protect yourself from the things that are making you hopeless. I can't answer you what makes you hopeless. I can't. But I can tell you that there are things that will actually make you believe that you cannot do the things that I believe God is calling you to do. And you're going to have to stay committed to protecting your hope. I'm thinking about all of those great people. I tell this story some. I moved to Montgomery, Alabama. I had the great privilege of knowing Rosa Parks. She was a mentor to me. And there was an amazing woman by the name of Johnny Carr. Johnny Carr was the architect of the Montgomery bus boycott. And when I moved to Montgomery, Ms. Carr called me and she said, Bryan, I understand you're a lawyer, just moved to town. I said, yes, I am. She said, well, my name is Johnny Carr. I'm the architect of the Montgomery bus boycott. I'm still the president of the Montgomery Improvement Association. And then she said, since you're a young lawyer, just moved to town, I'm going to tell you something. She said, because I'm the president of the Montgomery Improvement Association, I'm going to call you up sometimes and I'm going to ask you to go some places and speak. And then she said, I'm going to call you up sometimes and I'm going to ask you to go some places and listen. And then she said, when I call you up and ask you to do something, you're going to say, yes, ma'am. Wow. And so I said, yes, ma'am. And she would call me and send me places to speak and call me and send me places to listen. And then one day she called me and she said, Bryan, Rosa Parks is coming to town. She said, we're going to get together at Virginia Durr's house, a white woman whose husband, Clifford Durr, represented Dr. King. She said, we're going to get together and just talk. And she said, do you want to come over and listen? I said, oh, yes, ma'am, I do. And she said, all right, Bryan, you come on over. And I went over to Virginia Durr's house, and I sat on this porch, and I listened to Rosa Parks and Johnny Carr and Virginia Durr talk. They were in their 80s, and the amazing thing about their conversation is that none of them were talking about the things they'd done in the past. They were still talking about the things they planned to do. There was a hope in the lives of these voices. They had this hope. Their hope wouldn't let them stop. Their hope wouldn't let them retire. Their hope wouldn't let them rest. And I sat there for 2 hours. I just soaked it all in. And finally, at some point, Ms. Parks turned to me. She said, now, Bryan, tell me about the Equal Justice Initiative. Tell me what you're trying to do. And I looked at Ms. Carr to see if I had permission to speak, and she nodded. And then I turned to Ms. Parks and I gave her my whole rap. I said, well, we're trying to do something to end the death penalty. We're trying to help children prosecuted as adults. We're trying to do something about mass incarceration. We're trying to help the poor. We're trying to help people with disabilities. We're trying to help the mentally ill. We're trying to do something about racial bias. We're trying to do something about exclusion. I gave her my whole rap. And when I finished, she looked at me and she said, She said, that's going to make you tired. And that's when Ms. Carr leaned forward and she put her finger in my face and she said, that's why you've got to be brave. I'm here to tell you that it takes courage to stay hopeful. But if we are hopeful and we get proximate and we change these narratives, we can increase the justice in this country. One more thing. You can't do it just by being proximate, just by changing narratives, just by staying hopeful. The fourth and final thing we're going to have to do, and this is the hard one, y'all. The fourth and final thing we're going to have to do when we leave this place is that we're going to have to commit ourselves to doing things that are uncomfortable and inconvenient. We cannot create justice. We cannot advance this vision. We cannot actually make true the faith that we are called to if we're unwilling to do uncomfortable and inconvenient things. And it's hard because we're human. And humans are biologically and psychologically programmed to do what's comfort. We like comfort. Which means that we're going to have to make a choice to do the uncomfortable things. And I wish I didn't have to put this to you, but I have no choice but to give you what I've been given. And I'm telling you that if we're going to change the world, if we're going to create justice to honor Dr. King, we're going to have to do uncomfortable and inconvenient things. And it's hard. But there is in this choice to do the uncomfortable something rich and powerful that happens on the other side. I was giving a talk in a church. And this older black man came into the church. He was in a wheelchair. He was sitting in the back of the church, and he was just glaring at me. He had this stern, angry look on his face. I couldn't figure out why he was looking at me so sternly. And I got through my talk, and people were very nice and appropriate, but that older black man just kept sitting in the back, just staring at me. And finally, when everybody else left, this older black man wheeled himself to the front of the church in his wheelchair. And when he got in front of me, he put his hand up, and he said, do you know what you're doing? And I just stood there. And then he asked me again, he said, do you know what you're doing? And I stepped back and I mumbled something. I don't even remember what I said. And then he asked me again. He said, do you know what you're doing? And that's when this older man looked at me and he says, I'm going to tell you what you're doing. And this older black man looked at me and he said, you're beating the drum for justice. You keep beating the drum for justice. I was very moved. I was very moved. It was so moving. I was also really relieved because I just didn't know what was about to happen. And then this man pulled me by my jacket into his wheelchair. He said, come here, come here, come here. I'm going to show you something. And this older man turned his head. He said, you see this scar I have behind my right ear? He said, I got that scar in Greene County, Alabama, 1963, trying to register people to vote. He turned his head. He said, you see this cut I have down here at the bottom of my neck? Got that cut in Philadelphia, Mississippi, 1964, trying to register people to vote. He turned his head. He said, you see this dark spot? He said, that's my bruise. Got my bruise in Birmingham, Alabama, 1965, trying to register people to vote. And then this man looked at me. He said, I'm going to tell you something, young man. He said, people look at me. They think I'm some old man sitting in a wheelchair covered with cuts and bruises and scars, but I'm here to tell you something. He said, these are not my cuts. He said, these are not my bruises. He said, these are not my scars. He said, these are my medals of honor. And beloved, the true honor of Dr. King is not in high places. It's not in churches. The true honor of Dr. King is in the jails and the prisons. It's in the slums. It's where people are addicted and desperate. It's at the border. It's where people are suffering. It's in community with those who are afflicted and disabled. And to honor him, we're going to have to pick up our cuts. We're going to have to be willing to be bruised and scarred, but don't worry about it because there is something that comes with that. There is this grace and there is this love. And the last thing I want to say to you is that we've all got to meet the challenges. I really want you to think about what's making you hopeless and fight against it. I'm going to lay something on you. God's been working with me. I'm going to be honest. He's been working with me. I've felt him. He's been saying some things to me and I've felt a bit burdened by the conversation we're having. And I feel like God is saying to me, I need you to get ready, Bryan. He said, I need you to do something for me. He said, I allowed you to go to law school. I allowed you to get that law degree. And now I'm calling you to be ready. And I feel like God is telling me, you better get ready, Bryan, because we're living at a time where they've actually put grace on trial. They don't believe in redemption anymore. They stopped believing in love. They've given up on nonviolence. They've given up on justice. And we're going to have to go to court, Bryan. And I might need you to be a lawyer in my case. And so I've been thinking about what I'm going to do when God calls me to be his lawyer when they've got grace on trial, when they've stopped questioning redemption, when they don't believe in mercy and love. And I've started working on the case in my head. And what I've had to say is I need the preachers to get ready. I want the imams to get ready. I want the rabbis to get ready. I want the theologians to get ready. I want the deacons to get ready. I want the choir to get ready. I want the singers to get ready. But what I've decided is that my first witnesses, when they put grace on trial, it's going to be the condemned. It's going to be the poor. It's going to be the excluded. It's going to be the neglected. It's going to be the broken among us. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing. I believe really simple things. I believe that each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. I actually believe if somebody tells a lie, they're not just a liar. I think if somebody kills somebody, they're not just a killer. There is this grace, and justice requires that we know the other things people are. I'm also persuaded that today the opposite of poverty is not wealth. We talk too much about money in America. I am persuaded that the opposite of poverty isn't wealth. I believe the opposite of poverty is justice. And when we do justice, we deconstruct all of these things. And finally, I believe that we're going to be judged in our celebration of Dr. King. We're going to be judged here in Atlanta. We're going to be judged in America in our celebration of these values so hard won, not by how we treat the powerful, not by how we treat the rich, not by how we treat the privileged, but we're going to be judged by how we treat the poor, the incarcerated, the condemned, the undocumented, and the excluded. I have this great hope That if we get proximate, if we change narratives, if we stay hopeful, if we do uncomfortable things, we can increase the justice. What does the scripture say? It says to do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God. Let's do it together. Let's lift up the poor. Let's find ways to change the narratives. Let's stay hopeful, and let's do uncomfortable things in service of our God and the justice that we are called to. God bless all of you.
Yes, they're all but sold out to the merchant ship. Minutes after they took off from the bottomless pit, but my hand was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption song. Redemption song. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption song. Redemption song. Redemption song. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Can y'all help me sing this? Won't you help to sing? Everybody lift your voices. These songs of freedom. Sing it. 'Cause all I ever had, redemption song. Redemption song. Redemption song. Da 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 da. Love's in need of love today. 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 So won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption song.
Please give it up for Jahi Winston, please. The son of the prophet Winston. Can we just stand to our feet and make some noise? Give God some praise for Bryan Stevenson. Come on, give God some praise for that incredible message of hope that he gave us. Wow, redemption song. In a moment, we're going to have our bell ringing ceremony. You may be seated. But before we do that, we're going to have a time of giving. Now, this is really important. I heard someone say that if you don't vote, you don't possess the right to complain about the election or about the democratic process. Well, we feel the same way about injustice. If you don't give to the organizations and support the voices that are speaking out against injustice, like the King Center, we have no right to complain. And this is usually when we check out. We like to shout, we like to sing, we like to complain. For some of us, we even like to rally and march. But when it comes to supporting the causes, we check out. Here's what I want you to know. The King Center spends countless hours under the leadership of Dr. Bernice King and their board, investing in the next generation. Doing moments like this where our nation can come together and remember the redemption that is so needed. Dr. Stevenson, I can call him doctor, because I feel like he is. He gave us a challenge at the end, and the challenge was to commit. It was to commit to doing some things that may be a little bit uncomfortable. Didn't he promise that? Didn't he ask us to do that? And so I'm asking you now, if you would commit even $1, $20. For some of you, if you have it, go ahead and give us $1 million. Some of you got it and you're not telling anybody about it. I know. It's in there. You've been saving it for the right time. God, show me when to give. This is God in this moment. Would you take your cell phone out right now and just wave it at me? If you have a cell phone, would you take your cell phone out and wave it at me right now? Yeah, hold it up high. Hold it up high. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to text MLK Day to 44321. MLK Day to 44321. I want you to text into that number right now and give something. Give something. Come on, take a moment and give something. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll repeat the number again. It's 44321. Text MLK Day to 44321. If you are watching at home or on television right now, pull out your cell phones on your couch while you're eating your bacon and type in MLK Day to 44321. 2-1. Let's make history in this moment. Let's support these institutions. If we don't support, we don't have the right to complain. We don't. Let's put our money where our mouth is and where our heart is, and let's support these organizations that are committing themselves to change. At this time, I want to invite members of the Atlanta Consular Corps as we have our bell ringing ceremony.
Ireland rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Israel rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Costa Rica rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Japan rings the bell for the love of humanity.
France rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Mexico rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Canada rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Republic of Korea rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Republic of India rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Jamaica rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Nigeria rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Belgium rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Germany rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Brazil rings the bell for the love of humanity.
The Republic of Liberia rings the love for humanity.
The island of Cyprus rings the bell for the love of humanity.
The Commonwealth of the Bahamas rings the bell for the love of humanity.
Barbados rings the bell for the love of humanity.
This is what a beloved community looks like.
Thank you for joining us for our live coverage of the annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemorative Service. For a complete wrap-up of the King Holiday events, please join us tonight on Fox 5 News at 5 and 6. Have a great day.
We've also received some requests already on how can
Thanks for joining us for the 2019 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemorative Service. Have a great day.
The deal is, you work hard for your employer every day. But what happens when you're injured? You may assume that workers' compensation will take care of you.
The insurance company said I could fill out some form.
It shouldn't be so hard to get the treatment that I need.
Call a law firm with power, experience, and resources.
The call was free and confidential.
And just like that, things started to happen.
Tell them you mean business. Call Gary Martin Hayes and Associates, 1-800-WIN-WIN-1, and get their zero-fee guarantee.
At AT&T, we believe in access, the opportunity for everyone to explore a digital world full of possibilities, connecting with family, friends, and the things that matter most. And because nothing keeps us more connected than the internet, we've created Access from AT&T. If a member of your household is a SNAP participant, you may qualify for home internet at a discounted rate of $10 a month. No commitment, deposit, or installation fee. Visit att.com/access now to learn more.
We now return to regularly scheduled programming on Fox 5 Atlanta.
so I called a powerful law firm.
Gary Martin Hayes and Associates.
More power, more experience.
Tell the insurance company you mean business. Call Gary Martin Hayes and Associates and get their zero-fee guarantee.
Welcome back to TMZ Live. Tensions are running high leading up to the Sundance Film Festival premiere of Leaving Neverland. This is the documentary you've heard a lot about. The Michael Jackson estate is not happy about this, and it will feature two people who have accused Michael Jackson
in the past
of obviously he's dead.
God, that was a stupid thing to say. I'm so sorry. You're absolutely right. Well, no, just that they didn't come forward all of a sudden now.
Right, yes, who have made their allegations before, Wade Robson and James Safechuck, but their stories will be featured in Leaving Neverland. And
the estate is, the Michael Jackson estate is furious at this, and they're saying that both of them are liars. They're saying that Wade Robson came forward so much later, and it said things that were very supportive of Michael Jackson until he didn't.
Right.
So it's very controversial, and there are going to be protests at Sundance when this documentary is released a week from today.
Now, yeah. So people in Park City bracing for the worst.
Yeah, we spoke to the Park City PD that tells us that they've caught a lot of chatter on social media of Michael Jackson supporters that are upset that this film is being screened at Sundance. And there's a lot of Michael Jackson supporters that are encouraging people to show up to protest the documentary.
Michael Jackson supporters, I mean, obviously we knew when he was alive, were absolutely fanatical in their love for Michael, and there are millions of them who still feel that way.
Right.
So I think they're smart to brace for this, because undoubtedly some number will show up. I don't know how many will show up, but I guarantee you will see people there
absolutely.
protesting this.
Organizers are most concerned about the Q&A portion of the screening. They said
where people can come in, right?
They said historically speaking, somebody will say, I want to ask a question under the guise of not asking something controversial, and then they'll throw something in that, really stirs the pot.
This is Robert in Albuquerque. I got to say this. This R. Kelly situation basically is having everyone come out with documentaries, and I side with everyone that does not want to see this Michael Jackson documentary. Stop it.
Okay.
Well, it's gonna debut.
Strong opinions on both sides.
Okay, we're gonna move on.
Yes, to Ray J, who's celebrating his 38th birthday as only Ray J can. Listen, you know what? It's your birthday. Why not go out and treat yourself?
And your wife.
Exactly, and he did in a big, big way. He hit up the Barrett Jackson auction in Scottsdale, Arizona, got a VIP tour of all the vehicles there. There are amazing vintage vehicles.
He dropped a lot of money.
And then he opened up his wallet and decided, let me take a couple things home with me.
He bought something not only for himself, but for his wife, too, and in the process, plunked down $400,000. He bought a 2019 Lincoln Navigator for Princess Love and the baby.
Sweet.
And then got himself a nice little Maybach, 2018, Maybach.
I like you say nice little Maybach.
Right, I know. Well, a $320,000 car.
It's a tank.
That he's going to have in New York City and use for business purposes.
Tax write-off.
Not
tax
bad.
write-off.
Not bad for 38, by the way.
You only got the 2018, huh? Didn't want to get
2019, he said.
No, the 2019 was the Lincoln.
Oh, right.
The Maybach is the 2018.
It was a closeout.
Yeah, I'm sure you got a deal on it.
Okay, we're going to take a break.
When we come back, we told you about Prince Philip's really scary wreck where he flipped his car. Well, he has had to go back to the hospital today. Doctors concerned. That's the bad news for him. The good news is he's already got a new ride. The question is, will he still drive at 97?
Should he still drive?
First time I saw them was in a dream. Now I know how the world ends.
Can you read my mind?
That's impossible.
This seems like the kind of place where impossible things happen.
Tonight at 9 on Fox 5.
Is this where opioids are taking you? At first they were treating your physical pain.